I'm your bedtime historian, and tonight I promise you, the Roman Empire's finest secrets were never whispered in marble halls. They were scratched on bathroom walls by men too drunk to spell. Step closer. Imagine warm volcanic dust drifting through narrow Pompeian streets, sealing scandalous scribbles for centuries. Lovers' quarrels, bawdy jokes, crude insults, inkless hidden until the earth itself coughed them up again. Why did these crude lines outlast polished histories? Whose hands carved them, and for whose laughter? If secrets like these help you drift from modern worries, tap that like and subscribe. History might not care, but your sleepy brain will. Somewhere out there, someone's half awake wondering what their bathroom walls would say if buried for 2,000 years. Care to wonder with them. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You lean into the cracked plaster of a quiet back alley in Pompeii. The sun sets behind Vesuvius, that restless giant who would one day freeze this place in ash, preserving drunken words no poet dared to publish. You run your fingers over faint scratches. A man once stood here, stylus in hand, while merchants haggled and lovers fought in the next street over. One line catches your eye, crudely carved letters boasting about wine women and unpaid debts. It's ordinary and magnificent all at once. No emperor's decree, no poet's flourish, just a drunk's half-truth frozen forever. Historians still argue whether these walls were mere idle doodles or a vital public voice. Some see them as democratic margins where the voiceless mocked senators bragged of affairs or slandered neighbors. Others claim they were private jokes, meant for friends passing by at dawn. One fragment reads, "I screwed the barmaid here, ask her husband." Another, "Successus loves Iris, who does not care. So much for discreet courtship. Quirky mean and human proof that ancient Rome's gossip columns lived in its back alleys, not its libraries." You picture that alley the morning after a new vendor sets up shop, a passing donkey snorts, a curious child traces the letters. Nobody cares that these fleeting boasts will outlive marble palaces. The next storm might wash them away, unless the mountain intervenes. And Vesuvius did intervene. When it roared in 79 CE, its boiling ash and pumice smothered the streets and locked these scribbles in a stone coffin. What might have been swept clean by time instead lay hidden, waiting for trowels and brushes to revive every petty insult and stolen kiss. Imagine being the archaeologist who first brushed away centuries of dirt to find a crude doodle of a gladiator with an oversized pride. Beneath layers of noble ruins, a schoolboy's dirty joke survived better than any emperor's bust. That irony still tickles the scholars sifting through layers of mud and marble today. Some researchers continue to debate whether all these lines were truly graffiti in the modern sense, or more like public notices, political slogans, or coded messages among conspirators. The boundary between vandalism and everyday announcement was blurrier than you'd think. In the Roman mind, a wall was parchment, an invitation for anyone with something to say. As you stand there, the evening chill rolls down from the mountain. You press your palm to the wall again, tracing the ghosts of lives so ordinary they became immortal. A laugh echoes in your head, someone's drunken bark from 2 millennia back. You can almost hear the scratch of a stylus, the slap of sandals, the hiss of wine poured too generously. Every crumb of plaster holds a secret joke, a lover's spiteful jab, a name left to spite forgetfulness. And here you are, centuries away, reading the walls that refuse to stay silent. The shadows grow longer, as we step from this first wall deeper into Pompeii's labyrinth of ancient scribes. Let's see what else they left behind, hidden jokes that still manage to raise an eyebrow or a sleepy grin. A faded fig leaf might cover a statue's shame, but no fig leaf could hide the insults Romans carved for each other under the cover of night. Here, near what was once Pompeii's bustling forum, you find a cluster of scrawled lines half lost in crumbling brick. You tilt your head to read them. A senator's name, a crude stick figure, an expletive. The ancients had no patience for polite restraint. Politicians were fair game for a public roast right there on the walls that claimed to uphold Roman virtue. One line reads, "Vatia is a thief." Another, "Caius is a donkey. He brays at his own speeches." You can almost hear the stifled giggles of the common folk who risked a fine to scratch these tiny rebellions into plaster. It's petty vandalism, yes, but also an echo of free speech centuries before the term existed. Historians still argue whether these rude doodles genuinely influenced local politics or simply amused passers-by. Some believe they shaped gossip that could sway a fragile reputation. Others say they were just the ancient equivalent of scribbling mustaches on campaign posters. You crouch closer. Next to the insults is a sloppy drawing, a stick figure senator with a potbelly and an exaggerated well-everything. The artist didn't care for accuracy. He cared that someone might snort wine through their nose reading it, and someone surely did. One overlooked detail: these insults were rarely anonymous. Names and rival gangs signed their mischief proudly. Local tavern owners, brothel workers, even bored soldiers left their mark. Reputation was a fragile thing in Rome. One scratch could follow a man longer than a dagger's wound. As you trace the cracks, you imagine the city at dawn, graffiti artists slipping away before patrols made their rounds. A baker's boy might tattle for a few coins, but mostly everyone turned a blind eye. After all, who could resist reading? The chilly breeze carries the faint scent of ancient bread ovens and donkey dung everyday Pompeii. You stand brushing dust from your fingertips and glance down another alley. If politicians couldn't escape ridicule, surely lovers fared no better. Let's wander to where hearts and daggers left their mark in plaster. A lover's promise can fade from memory overnight, unless you carve it into stone for every drunk gossip and rival to see. Tucked behind a tavern's warped wooden doorframe, you find what looks like a child's messy scrawl. But lean closer, and you find a drama fit for any soap opera Roman edition. Secundus loves Prima, may she always be faithful. The next line scratched deeper. Prima sleeps with Marcus, so much for eternal devotion. You can almost picture the scene: Secundus tipsy, on sour wine, swaying on his feet as he scratches his passion into plaster. Later, Marcus, or some nosy tavern regular, adds the twist. Who needs parchment when the tavern wall remembers every betrayal? Some scholars remain puzzled by the purpose behind these lovers' scribbles. Were they confessions, warnings, spiteful revenge, or drunken boasts shouted into the void of Roman nightlife? One corner holds a tiny heart carved around a pair of names. Next to it, an equally crude doodle, a donkey standing under a heart, Rome's way of saying he's a fool for love. You follow the wall around the tavern's side. Here, the lines grow saucier. Myrtus gives good bread and better company. Bread, you wonder, or something more scandalous. The line between bakery and brothel blurred at the city's edges. A quirky fact: some taverns hired scribes for drunk patrons too far gone to scratch their own lines. Pay a copper coin, whisper your heartbreak, and your insult or confession went up for all to see, spelling optional. By dawn, lovers' promises tangled with curses. One heartbreak etched over another layer upon layer until the wall itself became a palimpsest of fleeting passion and permanent regret. When the mountain finally erupted, these petty heartbreaks survived, alongside mosaics and temples, proof that Rome's beating heart was never just marble and statues. You stand back, listening for an echo, maybe the hushed giggle of a lover hiding behind a wine barrel, or the bark of an angry husband stumbling through the alley, searching for the traitor who immortalized his shame. As you step from the tavern wall, the streets widen into the rowdy hum of Pompeii's bars. If hearts were carved in plaster, so too were fists, threats and boasts after one cup too many. Let's follow the trail. Next stop, the bar brawls and bragging matches that turned stone into rumor mill. A Roman bar at midnight smelled of cheap wine sweat and the sharp edge of someone's temper about to spill onto stone. You push open the ghost of a tavern door stepping over cracked thresholds into the memory of a bar that once roared with drunken boasts. Here the walls hold more than just love notes, they hold the aftermath of bruised egos and broken teeth. One line stands out among the grime, Afer punched Sura. Sura wept like a girl. Another scratches deeper. Marcus drinks more than he pays. This wasn't history's polite record. This was the rowdy chatter scribbled where everyone stumbled past it the next night. Some historians still argue whether these barroom boasts were written by bragging drunks or mocking witnesses. Did the bruised man come back to mark his defeat, or did the victor etch his glory for the next poor soul to read? A quirky detail, archaeologists found whole sections of tavern walls layered with overlapping fists and stick figure scuffles, like a storyboard for a fight nobody remembered clearly the next morning. Leaning back, you can almost smell the sour wine dribbling over cracked tables. The floor sticky with spilled drink, a brawl brewing in the corner, the barkeep pretending not to notice as long as the coin kept clinking. The wall was the only one honest enough to keep score. One scratch reads like a threat and a joke all at once. Who steals my wine will drink my fist. Below it, someone added, he did. He did. A soft debate still lingers among scholars. Did these graffiti fights mirror Rome's bigger battles? Was every bar brawl just a small echo of the arena where pride and bruises were traded like coins? Or were they simply bored drunks, marking territory before dawn washed their names away? You follow the jagged trail of insults and boasts to the back wall near the lavatorium, where drunks stumbled out for relief and stumbled back in for more. This brings you to another crude corner of Roman humor. Bathroom walls, where dignity went to die and jokes live forever. A soft hush of laughter drifts in your mind as you leave the bar's shadows behind. Next stop, the oldest public bathroom humor you never knew you needed. If you think bathroom humor is modern, you've never read what Romans scribbled when nature called. Step through the cool dusk into a cramped stone-walled latrine, once busy with toga hems brushing damp floors, the air thick with stale water and whispered curses. Here, under flickering lamplight, Rome's finest philosophers traded dignity for doodles. On one cracked slab above a communal bench, you find it Cacator Cave Malum, which politely translates to Pooper, beware of evil. A warning, a prank, maybe just a bored joke to pass the time while waiting your turn. A little farther down, more crude lines. Secundus did this, nobody else would brag. And next to it, an etching of a man, mid-squat, rendered with the same casual artistry as any statue in the Forum, except this man has a donkey's head. Scholars continue to debate why so much scatological scribbling ended up on latrine walls instead of being swept away by routine cleaning. Did workers find it too funny to scrub off? Or did they carve some of it themselves during long shifts tending to the pipes and flow? A quirky discovery in Ostia. Ancient Rome's port city archaeologists uncovered an entire row of public toilets with graffiti so layered it looked like a palimpsest of crude jokes and shady insults. Rival gangs traded insults across the stones like a never-ending conversation between strangers squatting side by side. Imagine the scene, a line of citizens perched shoulder to shoulder passing gossip while pretending not to smell what they did. Someone pulls out a stylus, scratches a rude pun. The next person adds a crude sketch. The communal spirit of the latrine lives on the walls long after the waste washed away. One line makes you snort softly. Here I shat here, I laughed. It's so simple, so human proof, that even emperors sat the same way as beggars did their reputations never safe from the stall's sharp stylus. As you rise from this ghostly stone seat, the night air feels cleaner by contrast. The walls echo with quiet chuckles, and the faint slap of sandals as someone ducks out, half smiling at the insult they left behind for tomorrow's unsuspecting visitor. But the graffiti didn't spare even the mighty, next the same scrawling hands dared to roast the gods themselves. Follow me through the alleyways of the divine where Roman deities learned humility at the tip of a stylus. If you ever feared divine punishment for telling jokes about the gods, you'd be braver than half of ancient Rome. Under the flickering torchlight of a small shrine's crumbling wall, you find irreverent lines carved with more gall than skill. Imagine the scene, a Roman trader tipsy after too much wine, leaning against sacred stone to scrawl his opinions about Jupiter's thunderbolts or Venus's alleged morals. One line reads, "Jupiter cheats, worse than my neighbor." Below it, a rough doodle of the king of gods, complete with exaggerated belly and tiny thunderbolt. Another scratch adds Venus favors anyone with enough coin. Even the divine couldn't hide from a tipsy wit armed with a stylus. There's no scholarly consensus on whether these insults were sacrilegious rebellion or just casual mischief. Some believe they were genuine jabs at a priestly class that often claimed moral superiority while pocketing temple donations. Others say the jokes were whispered, amusements, small ways for everyday people to poke holes in the all-seeing eyes of Olympus. A quirky detail in Herculaneum, an entire temple wall was found, with hidden jokes tucked between prayers. The same stone bore praises for a safe voyage and a tiny cartoon of Neptune drowning in a barrel of fish. You stand there imagining the sly grin of the carver who risked the god's wrath for a cheap laugh. Did anyone notice? Did the priest turn a blind eye? Or did they chisel it off at dawn, only to find it scratched again by nightfall? One surviving line simply says, "Mars is strong, but wine is stronger." Underneath, the faint trace of spilled wine soaked into the wall centuries ago still stains the stone like a ghost of the joke itself. These irreverent scribbles remind you that the Roman world balanced devotion and defiance like two amphorae on a tilting cart. Faith in the gods was real, so was the need to laugh at their flaws when backs were turned. You brush the stone lightly, feeling a warmth in its cold surface. For a heartbeat, it's as if you're shoulder to shoulder with the nameless prankster, both of you, stifling giggles in the hush of the sacred hall. And as the torchlight flickers low, you step back into the street, where another kind of bold hand left its mark, soldiers far from home, carving names and boasts on distant walls to remind the world and themselves that they once stood guard here. Some men carried swords and shields to mark their territory. Others carried a stylus and left their name behind on cold stone far from Rome's marble heart. You wander through the ruin of a lonely watchtower on the empire's northern fringe. The wind sighs through cracks in the wall, but if you lean close, you'll see it a name carved deep into the rough stone letters, neat but hurried. Titus of the 20th Legion stood guard here. No boast, no joke, just proof that he existed, that he watched these hills for danger, that he missed home enough to scratch his story for the ages. Nearby, another line, Felix was here, with fear. Short, trembling letters did Felix stand watch in a snowstorm, clutching a rusty spear, half listening for barbarian drums beyond the trees. Historians continue to debate whether these soldier graffiti were sanctioned marks, prideful records of Roman presence, or private mementos left against orders, whispered reminders to the stone that they weren't ghosts yet. A quirky find once stunned archaeologists near Hadrian's Wall, a crude carving of a helmeted man with a very dramatic nose and stick-thin legs standing triumphantly above what looks like a sleeping bear. Some say it's a soldier's cartoonish brag he faced a bear and lived to tell it. Others suspect it's a joke at a comrade's expense. Roman humor never missed a chance to jab at a friend's bravery. The cold wind ruffles your hair as you trace the letters with your fingertip. You feel the scratchy groove, the stubborn heartbeat that said, "I was here. I mattered." These scribbles span the empire from the walls of Vindolanda to dusty Syrian forts. Soldiers posted thousands of miles from Rome still carried the same need to carve their names into oblivion before oblivion carved them away. Imagine a guard leaning against a tower wall blade tucked in his belt, squinting at a sunset that looked nothing like his village sky. He chips at the stone between patrols, maybe humming a bawdy barracks song, maybe muttering about the pay that never arrives on time. As you step back, the watchtower feels less empty, its silence filled with ghostly echoes of boots, laughter, whispered prayers for a discharge order that never came. The wall still stands, and so does their scratchwork testament that even the empire's farthest shadows knew the warmth of a name left behind. And as you drift away from this lonely outpost, you find new marks waiting back in the city, where soldiers swapped swords for sharp words, turning political campaigns into scribbled battlegrounds. Let's slip back to Rome's streets to see how a vote could be scratched away by a single wicked line. A senator's silver tongue might sway the form by day, but by night a single scratch in wet plaster could unravel a campaign faster than any rival speech. Wander with me down a narrow Pompeian street, where election slogans once plastered every wall. Bright red letters promise fresh bread, lower taxes, a friend at court. But look closer. Between the neat brushstrokes, you'll find the mischief graffiti curling like ivy through official paint, mocking promises and twisting names into curses. One battered wall reads, "Vote for Lucius, who feeds dogs better than men." Another line cuts deeper. "If you trust Marcus, you trust a goat to guard grain." No official herald could silence these phantom scribes' sharp styluses in shaky hands, scratching reputations raw in the dark. Historians still disagree on how much power these rogue lines truly held. Some say a single mocking phrase could cost a man his seat on the council. Others argue they were little more than bathroom jokes dressed up in political ink, cheap laughs that disappeared with the next rainstorm. A quirky detail: some candidates hired loyal gangs, scriptores, to scribble slogans or slander rivals. This backfired as often as it worked. If your paid writer had a grudge or a full wine jug, your own walls could suddenly declare your worst secrets to every passerby. You run your palm over the faded slogans, the paint flakes beneath your touch, some words still bright, some just ghost shadows of broken promises. The air feels thick with murmurs, merchants muttering over campaign lies, old widows chuckling at rude rhymes, children giggling as they learn new curses from walls meant to uphold dignity. Imagine the dawn before an election. Fresh slogans appear in careful brushstrokes. Marcus for Adal, honest and brave. By noon, a sneaky line. Marcus for Adal, drunk and lazy. By dusk, another layer. Marcus paid me to write this. He owes 2 denarii. This swirl of official and forbidden words turned every wall into a battlefront where no guard could patrol fast enough to catch every stylus scratching its quiet rebellion. You smile picturing the candidate's red-faced rage. Then you drift further down the street, past the campaign walls, and toward quieter corners where paint yields to plaster and plaster hides secrets far steamier than any election scandal. Here, murals once told stories, sweet, scandalous, and spiced with words that made even Roman senators blush. Let's slip behind a private courtyard's gate, where erotic murals whispered their secrets in cheeky captions no patron would dare admit to reading twice. Some Roman houses hid more gossip in painted plaster than any whispered scandal at the baths. And if the walls weren't enough, they carved extra commentary right beside the art. Slip behind a half-fallen courtyard archway. You find yourself staring at a mosaic of Venus, reclining among playful cupids. Nothing shocking by Roman standards, but your eyes drift lower to the caption, scratched in just deep enough to last. Livia was here, twice as lovely, twice as kind. Who was Livia? A patron's muse, a courtesan immortalized by a jealous rival. The wall doesn't explain it, just teases. A few steps deeper, the images grow bolder. Couples entangled under painted vines, bodies half gilded in faded ochre and cobalt. Someone couldn't resist adding a scratch. Better here than in Marcus's bed. Historians still debate whether these saucy captions were playful enhancements or petty slanders disguised as bawdy jokes. One quirky detail: some households threw lavish dinners in rooms lined with erotic murals. Guests reclined on couches, toasting wine and trading knowing glances while reading the walls aloud, like a naughty parlor game preserved for centuries under volcanic ash. A famous example, near Pompeii's suburban baths, shows Priapus weighing his oversized pride against a bag of coins. Beneath the painting, someone scribbled rich in one pore in the other. It's graffiti as punchline, echoing across centuries with a wink and a smirk. As you drift along the mural, you run your finger across the painted figures. The colors have dimmed the outlines blurred by centuries of damp and tremors. But the sly lines remain sharper than any poet's verse, half truth, half dare frozen in plaster. Some scholars argue these captions acted as coded invitations for illicit pleasures. Others see them simply as the rowdy signatures of drunken guests showing off for friends. The truth, as always, lingers somewhere in the cracks. You step out into the courtyard garden, half expecting to see a pair of giggling lovers slip away behind a marble column. Their whispers are gone, but their jokes cling stubbornly to the stone proof that where wine flowed freely, so did gossip and wit. Outside the garden gate, the city hums again. Here, not every scribe had walls to work with. Some carried their secrets in pouches, chisels, knives, small blades to scratch messages into softer stone. Want to see how a simple tool turned any wall into a secret diary? Let's peek inside the toolkits of Rome's hidden scribes. In a city where marble monuments rose skyward, the real stories clung to walls at ankle height, etched by hands armed with humble tools sharp enough to outlast empires. Step with me into a cramped back room of an old stonemason shop, the air thick with dust and the faint sting of iron. Here lie the forgotten companions of Rome's secret scribes, chisels dulled by centuries, styluses worn thin by restless hands. You pick up a slender bronze stylus, its tip bent just so. Not grand enough to sign laws into motion, but perfect for scratching a lover's boast into a tavern wall before dawn. Beside it, a small iron spike, more suited for deeper cuts into tougher stone, the kind that dared to outlive a city's fall. A quirky fact, graffiti tools weren't limited to professional scribes. Bakers, barmaids, soldiers, and stable boys carried pocket knives sharp enough to mark their passing through a street or a brothel's back wall. Some carried pieces of charcoal instead, temporary ink for temporary insults. Historians still argue over how widespread these improvised tools really were. Some claim styluses were so common they were sold next to cheap wine and olives. Others believe only a bold few bothered to risk fines or angry tavern owners by scratching lines that mocked the powerful or immortalized the petty. You run a finger along a faint scratch in the wall, Saya was here. She laughs at you. Just 3 words and a ghostly giggle hidden behind the smell of wet clay and dust. One curious discovery in Pompeii's ruins, a wooden box charred but intact, containing 3 styluses, a tiny ink pot, and a scrap of parchment covered in doodles. Archaeologists call it a writing kit, but you know better. It's a gossip kit, a rumor mill in a box waiting for a bored hand and a blank wall. Imagine a drunk patron fumbling for his kit at the bar, scratching out a dirty pun while his friends cackle behind him. Or a young apprentice pausing mid-delivery to leave a mocking line for the next poor fool to read. You set the tools down, gently, no more words to carve tonight. But Rome's walls were never done whispering. Because when words alone failed, the scribes turned to puns so layered they'd make even a sleepy scholar crack a grin, ready to puzzle through a few filthy riddles. Let's lean closer and listen for the double meanings hidden in obscene puns that still linger like shadows in stone. Rome's graffiti artists weren't content with crude insults alone. Why carve a plain insult when you could bury it in wordplay that still makes scholars blush? 2,000 years later, duck under a half-collapsed archway behind a wine shop, where the walls once echoed with laughter and slurred riddles. Here, the plaster bears secrets only the slyest drinkers could untangle, dirty jokes dressed as clever puzzles. One line loops around itself like a snake eating its tail. I gave to her what she could not keep, yet she carries it still. At first glance, innocent. With wine in your cup and a wink from the carver's grin, the meaning turns more scandalous than poetic. Some puns play with Latin's double meanings, turning the word for fig into an unprintable body part, or twisting bread into something entirely less edible. A quirky detail: certain taverns were notorious for walls packed with layers of these sly word games. Archaeologists once uncovered a back room in Pompeii where every inch of plaster bristled with rude riddles like a bathroom stall turned riddle scroll. Surviving records offer conflicting accounts about who came up with these filthy lines. Some believe local poets tested their wit on these walls, playing to crowds who prefer to chuckle with their cheap wine. Others argue these were simple folks' jokes. Farmers, Traders and slaves pushing back at stiff Roman respectability with puns that no senator could scrub away. You trail your finger over the chipped grooves of one such puzzle. He enters soft leaves. Hard brings joy and shame alike. No prizes for guessing that answer under flickering lanterns at midnight. Sometimes these jokes layered wordplay so deep that modern Latin scholars still puzzle over the punchline. The beauty of a pun, after all, is that half the fun is never being entirely sure you've got it right. A soft laugh drifts through your mind. Was it the drunk who carved it, the crowd that read it, or your own sleepy grin echoing back through time? Step away from this riddle-scrawled corner, and you'll find the empire itself occasionally tried to scrub the walls clean. Bans were proclaimed, fines threatened, yet the puns always slipped back under fresh plaster, mocking the marble orders of emperors too distant to silence the city's cheekiest voices. So lean in as we turn toward the next stone, where the empire's iron hand swung down desperate to erase the jokes that kept reappearing like ghosts that refused to die. It's one thing to scribble an insult on a tavern wall, quite another to keep it there when the emperor's men come knocking with chisels and threats. Step with me through the cold hush of a Pompeian street at dawn, when city guards made their rounds, hunting for fresh mischief hidden in plain sight. The law was clear: deface public property, face a fine, or worse, a lash. But Rome's walls tell a different story, one of endless cat and mouse where scribes risked punishment to scratch forbidden jokes that no decree could bury for long. One fragment of an imperial edict preserved on a marble slab proclaims, "Let no citizen deface the walls of the city with vile words or marks under penalty of the whip and confiscation of goods." Yet just inches away on the same wall, this law is as weak as its maker. Scholars still chuckle at the irony Rome's censors could carve threats in stone, but the styluses always came back at night. Some historians argue these anti-graffiti laws were more about controlling politics than cleaning streets. After all, a smear scrawled in a back alley could ruin a senator faster than a rumor at the baths. Others believe the bans tried to preserve a respectable facade for visitors, an illusion of spotless streets masking the city's rowdy soul. A quirky detail: certain emperors hired crews of young men detergents to scrub walls, daily scouring away rude jokes before dawn. But even they weren't saints. Some left their own sly lines behind once the job was done, ensuring they stayed employed as long as scribes kept scribbling. You trail your palm along a battered stretch of plaster, the ghost of a chiseled-out line still faint under your fingertips. Some words proved too stubborn, cut down one day, they'd sprout back the next, like weeds in a crack of stone. Picture the city under moonlight, a boy with a knife crouched behind a column, listening for guards, while scratching a scandal about his master. A barkeep slipping outside at closing time to brag that a rival's wife visited his bed instead of her husband's. These walls were Rome's secret paper trail laws. Erase them, rainwash them, yet they reappeared, like the empire's living heartbeat. Each hidden scratch mocked the powerful's polished proclamations, reminding everyone that truth, filthy funny, or furious, clings tighter than any marble bust. And yet, not all the scribes were men. Among the many fading lines, rare and precious ones shine through lines that whisper the secret thoughts of Roman women who found ways to carve their own words into stone-defying silence. Let's find them next, tucked between insults and oaths, waiting to be heard in the hush of ancient plaster. Most voices scratched into Roman walls belong to men soldiers boasting drunks, complaining lovers, bragging about affairs nobody asked to know. But lean closer, and you'll find rare lines that break through that chorus whispers, from women who refuse to leave their thoughts behind closed doors. Picture a cramped courtyard behind a busy tavern. Here, under layers of obscene jokes and political jabs, a small, neat line curls into the plaster. Claudia wept for Lucius who lied. 4 words: grief, betrayal, defiance carved by a woman's hand, for eyes that might never see it, or everyone passing by. Some historians remain divided on whether these voices truly belonged to women or were mocking imitations scratched by men. But the handwriting smaller, sometimes elegant, the phrasing softer, yet sharper, makes some scholars certain not every Roman woman stayed quiet inside her courtyard walls. A quirky find still puzzles researchers today. In the ruins of Pompeii's so-called House of the Lovers, archaeologists found a cluster of overlapping graffiti signed by women's names. Aelia loves wine more than gossip. Sylvia says no man owns her bed. Playful or rebellious. Some argue they're boasts by courtesans, advertising charms. Others hear a sharper edge, a toast to freedom in a city that prized women's silence. You run your fingertips across one fading line. Julia laughed last. Nothing more yet, you can feel the grin behind those words. Maybe she got the final word in a lover's quarrel. Maybe it was a private joke that echoed through the courtyard as she turned away, stylus still warm. Imagine the hush of an afternoon kitchen pots, clanging, a matron slipping out back with a borrowed knife. One quick line in wet plaster, then gone, but not really gone. Her secret, her jab, her soft rebellion preserved by the same eruption that silenced senators and slaves alike. One scholar once called these stray women's lines accidental freedom, a moment when everyday walls gave voice to those who couldn't speak in the forum, but carved their truth where it might outlast every decree, every household rule. So you linger here a moment longer, palm pressed to the stone, feeling that stubborn heartbeat echo through centuries of gossip and ruin. But these were not the only secrets hidden in Roman graffiti. Some lines twisted meanings even deeper, camouflaging private jokes and coded insults that only the right eyes could decipher. Let's slip into the shadows again. Follow the trail of hidden messages that turned plain plaster into riddles for Rome's insiders alone. Some graffiti bragged loudly for all to see, some whispered only to those clever enough to read between the lines. Step with me into a shadowy passage behind an old bathhouse, its plaster flaking under centuries of damp yet stubborn scratches still coil like vines across the walls. At first glance, they're nonsense, random letters, mismatched words, strange little symbols tucked under arches and door frames. But lean in closer, and the puzzle sharpens hidden jokes, secret alliances, and coded warnings only an insider could crack. One faint line reads, "The fish swims upstream." Seems innocent enough, but scholars still argue whether this was a harmless proverb or a sly jab at a corrupt magistrate known for bribery. Fish was slang for silver coins in more than one Roman port. A small sign to friends, a trap for foes. Some hidden messages use clever wordplay to mask crude jabs. A scratched figure of a donkey with a senator's name beneath it, subtle, unless you knew the donkey meant fool or worse. A quirky find from Herculaneum shows a crude doodle of a pair of sandals beside the name Felix. Some think it marked a local brothel's secret password. Sandals oft meant favors traded quietly behind thick doors. Researchers continue to debate whether these secret lines were organized mischief messages traded by rebel gangs or political rivals, or just drunken pranks that accidentally became Rome's hidden footnotes. There's no single answer. Each wall keeps its secrets better than any marble vault. Run your fingertip along one coded line, Letters loop. Strangely, a single mark curves the meaning into something filthy or funny, depending who's reading. A half-washed symbol for Venus beside a gladiator's name. Did it mark a scandalous affair, or just a bawdy joke traded between friends? In some alleys, coded messages layered atop each other for years, old jokes barely visible beneath fresh scratches, like gossip buried under gossip. One wrong guess could cost a man his standing, or earn him a free drink from the one in on the joke. The night air cools as you step back from the wall. Secrets linger in the cracks, proof that Rome's sharpest scribes trusted stone more than they trusted parchment. And yet, for all their coded rebellion and rude humor, these ghostly scribbles never vanished completely. They waited in the dark until the mountain spoke ash fell, and centuries later, curious hands brushed them clean, piecing together daily lives from crude lines nobody thought worth saving. Let's linger a little longer. Come see how these rude, hidden voices found a second life, whispering to scholars and sleepy wanderers like you, who read the walls the emperors couldn't silence. Not every Roman poet found fame on papyrus. Some found it hidden in soot and stone lines that never graced scrolls, yet survived the centuries by accident, sealed away under a mountain's ash and the stubborn curiosity of generations to come. You stand now at the heart of Pompeii's ruins, warm wind brushing through silent columns. Everywhere you turn, walls murmur fragments of jokes, insults, heartbreaks, declarations of drunken glory, love, betrayal, and mischief that refuse to die with their scribes. One uncovered alley bears dozens of overlapping scratches, names piled on names until the plaster looks like a battered diary. Among them, Restitutus slept here alone and wept. Successus took what was not his. Beware the innkeeper's wine stronger than his morals. Archaeologists brushes in hand crouch in dusty corridors tracing these lines with careful reverence. Some debate whether graffiti should be called art vandalism or the rawest slice of daily life ever preserved. There is no scholarly consensus, only guesses layered like the graffiti itself. A quirky twist some of these walls inspired modern street art. A few rebellious artists in Naples once copied entire Roman lines onto city underpasses, ancient rude jokes reappearing beside modern ones. History, it seems, never stops scribbling in the dark. You wander past a half-rebuilt tavern, picturing the lives these lines recorded. No mighty generals, no polished marble statues, just the ordinary folk who lived loud, loved hard, fought over cheap wine, and left behind scratches that would outlast any emperor's face stamped in coin. One last secret lingers here. More graffiti still lies buried. Every scrape of a trowel in a hidden corner might unearth another rude pun or heartbreak line tomorrow. Each fresh find rewrites what we think we know, proof that even at history's edges, the smallest voices can outlast the grandest ones. You run your hand along the cold stone, tracing ghostly letters that outlived temples, storms, and empires. These rude scribbles are Rome's real memoir, etched in borrowed corners, mocking every king's decree, whispering truths that historians still puzzle over while you drift closer to sleep. So when you next see a bathroom wall's joke or a subway scratch, remember the empire that did it first, laughing, boasting sighing secrets to walls that promised nothing but silence, and delivered immortality instead. Not far from those scribbled stones lies another kind of record, written not in plaster, but in laughter, spilled wine, and the smoke-stained ceilings of Rome's noisiest dens. Drift just a few blocks in memory, and you'll find the source. You step inside a shadowy corner tavern, tucked behind Rome's bustling market streets. The door creaks on rusty hinges, half swallowed by years of grime and cigarette smoke that hasn't yet been invented, but feels oddly familiar. Inside, clay oil lamps sputter on rough-hewn beams. They cast flickering shadows that twist across walls painted with lewd graffiti and crude boasts about last night's dice scores. The tavern's air hums with warm, sour breath, cheap wine garlic sausage, and the faint promise of trouble if you stay too long. Your sandals scuff the sticky floor as you pass a gaggle of freedmen, their tunics spotted with oil and spilled wine. They lean together, heads bobbing, voices low, but laughter loud when coins clink and someone farts, earning a round of jeers. A half-drunk piper drags notes from a battered flute, out of tune and out of rhythm, but no one cares. This is the tavern's music, the restless shuffle of Rome's poorest blowing their meager coins on sour drink and rumors more intoxicating than any vintage. One fact echoes from stone to scroll. Historians agree these corner taverns, called Pompeii, outnumbered temples in some neighborhoods. The working poor couldn't afford fancy banquets or Senate halls, but they could afford watered-down wine by the cup, a cheap seat by the fire, and the company of fellow grumblers. Taverns were the Republic's real Senate, where shoemakers and fishmongers decided which rumor was worth passing along with tomorrow's loaf of bread. On the wall behind the counter, a fresco shows Bacchus with a grin so sly it might slip from plaster and wink at you. He cradles an amphora bigger than a small slave wine dribbling down his painted chin, like gossip dripping from the drunkard's mouth beside you. Some scholars argue whether Bacchus was painted to bless the tavern or mock the drunkards. Maybe both. The mural's colors are cracked, but the smirk lives on, like every rumor you're about to hear. At a splintered table near the back, a mother balances a squirming child on her knee while scolding her husband for losing his pay at dice last week. She drains her mug between curses. Nearby, two street hawkers haggle over a sack of stale chickpeas, each claiming the other owes him a meal. This is Rome's underbelly, soft sour alive. Even the emperor's decrees slither through these rooms, reshaped in whispers, twisted by drunks who'll swear they heard it from a senator's slave's cousin's lover. One quirky twist. Despite their lowly repute, many taverns were owned and managed by freedwomen, sharp-eyed, businesswomen who counted coins faster than any drunk could knock them over. Surviving tablets and legal scribbles show fines, debts, and petty lawsuits over spilled wine and broken promises. Whether any of these lawsuits were ever paid remains an open question. Historians still debate if tavern books were honest or half fiction, like the stories they sheltered. A gust of Rome's night air slips in when the door bangs open. A new pair of patrons stumble inside, eyes already glassy. They slap a coin on the counter, cheap bronze, worn smooth by countless hands, and the innkeeper barely glances before swapping it for a chipped mug. This is the heartbeat of the Pompeii coin wine rumor repeat. You shift your weight on a rickety bench, your elbow brushing a wall carved with names and half-finished insults. Rome's tavern walls spoke more honestly than marble statues ever could. They kept no secrets except the ones only the drunks knew how to bury beneath slurred laughter and the smell of sour wine. A rat skitters across your foot, vanishing behind the wine casks stacked precariously in the corner. It's an ancient tavern's secret co-inhabitant, more loyal than any customer, more discreet than any gossiping drunk. Some scholars suspect these rats did more to spread plagues than all the taverns combined. Others argue that's just another rumor brewed stronger with each retelling. Lean back, let your eyes drift shut for a moment. The piper's out-of-tune melody rattles above the hush of conspiring voices. Tomorrow's scandal might be born here tonight. Or maybe nothing will happen at all except 1,000 half-true stories drifting out the door with dawn's first light. And so you sit cup in hand, breath warm, heartbeat slow. Somewhere beyond these cracked walls, Rome's marble arches still gleam under moonlight. But here, in this tavern's flicker and hum, the empire's gossip thickens like cheap wine, left open too long. Stay a while, there's plenty more to overhear before you drift off. You slip deeper into the corner cup in hand as another jug is uncorked and secrets flow freer than the wine. Whispers coat the walls like damp mist, sticky, half-formed, impossible to catch once they slip past drunk lips. Welcome to the true newsroom of Rome, where rumor costs only a copper and your reputation might not survive the night. Lean closer to the cracked table where two freedmen hover over their mugs, eyes darting like startled sparrows. One leans in breath, sour with cheap Falernian, to spill a secret about a neighbor's missing goat, sold perhaps for a tryst, or maybe sacrificed in some back alley ritual that only the oldest crones would dare whisper about by daylight. No one really knows, and that's the point. The truth's not half as interesting as the version that grows thicker with every retelling. Wine shops, tabernae venarii, were Rome's open rumor mills. They lined narrow lanes where carts rattled and stray dogs begged for bones. For a few coins, anyone could drown their worries and feed their neighbor's curiosity at the same time. Records etched on pottery shards hint that even minor scandals could bubble into dangerous talk, who bribed which official, who plotted revenge against a cruel master, who dreamt of sneaking poison into a senator's drink. Real or imagined, these whispers gave the poor a taste of power words that might outlive them if they landed in the right ears. One recorded fact. The poet Juvenal famously complained about the endless gossip spilling out of Rome's wine dens. He mocked them as places where reputations died faster than liver cells. Some historians suspect the elite feared taverns more than rebel gatherings. After all, a sharp rumor was cheaper than a dagger and sometimes just as fatal. Slide your cup along the stained table and notice how each group huddles in private storms of chatter. A trader boasts of a shipment of Spanish oil that never arrived. A sly-eyed merchant tells a tale about a general's mistress and a bribe hidden in olive baskets. A group of farmhands, too, broke to buy real wine, sip a mouth-curdling vinegar brew, and invent conspiracies about next week's bread ration. Some scholars remain puzzled by how much of Rome's true history flickered to life in places like this, unrecorded, unverified, whispered into the ears of men too drunk to write it down. The barkeep, a wiry man with a nose that could sniff out debt a mile away, wipes mugs with a rag that's older than his eldest debt. He listens without listening, one ear, always tuned to the gossip that might earn him a coin or two more when he repeats it elsewhere. Behind him, dusty amphorae line the shelves, some half-filled, some empty, all promising more courage for a few more coins. At the back, near the broken window, where Rome's chill leaks and a lone figure scribbles on a wax tablet. He's eavesdropping, his stylus scratching rumors into crooked lines. Was he a gossip peddler, a spy, a bored poet desperate for scandalous verses? Surviving scraps of tavern graffiti suggest more than one political rumor was born on these cheap benches, slipped to the wrong ear, then ended up costing a noble his post or his head. It's here, swirling in the stale scent of spilled wine and half-baked threats, that you begin to understand how a Roman tavern could rival any Senate debate. Words flowed faster than law's secrets, fermented quicker than wine. There was no judge but the drunk next to you, no punishment but a punch in the nose, yet reputations rose and fell, all the same. Your drink is half gone now, the fire in the corner reduced to orange embers. A young server tiptoes by, refilling mugs, catching murmurs. Maybe she'll sell that rumor tomorrow. Maybe she'll forget it by dawn. Some researchers think the barmaids of Rome knew more state secrets than the scribes at the Forum, an invisible network of half-smiles and passing whispers traded for copper coins and leftover bread. You lift your mug again, bracing for another mouthful of sour courage. Outside, a cart creaks by its iron wheel, squealing like a gossiping tongue that never quits. Somewhere down the alley, a drunk barks a laugh that turns into a cough and a curse, and inside this tavern, another rumor is born about who will fall, who will rise, and who might not wake up sober enough to remember any of it. In this echoing room, Rome's greatest empire feels smaller than a wine jug and twice as fragile. Here, among slurred promises and threats whispered into clay cups, you feel how fragile a reputation can be, just a rumor or two away from ruin. You settle back your bench, creaking under your ears, pricked for the next scandal slipping from a stranger's mouth. The benches grow rougher the closer you drift toward the tavern's far wall, where the wine's cheaper, the talk louder, and the secrets a little more dangerous to hear. Here sit Rome's poor freedmen, just out of debt, laborers who sweat in the sun by day and curse their luck by night, drifters who cling to a stool like it's the last thing the city can't take from them. Your elbows rest on a sticky board that serves as a communal table. Splinters snag your sleeve as you lean in to catch a rant. A man with cracked sandals pounds his cup on the wood. He raves about a landlord who raised the rent twice this month, and about a senator's new bathhouse that siphons water from their neighborhood fountain. His voice rises, falls, and then twists into a boast. One day, he'll win enough at dice to buy that crooked landlord's villa, marble columns and all. The men around him hoot and slap his back, knowing full well he won't. Cheap seats bought big dreams in these cramped corners. A single bronze coin could keep a man at the table for hours, his tongue loose with complaint and his heart briefly fat with courage. Sometimes, when the wine soured too quickly and the mood turned, those boasts grew teeth-spitting talk of riots, of burning a landlord's house to the ground, of seizing bread carts meant for the rich. There's no tidy record of how many tavern rants ever bloomed into real rebellion. Historians still argue whether taverns really birthed insurrections or just drowned them in wine and hot air. Above your head, a cracked beam sags under a row of clay lamps that drip warm tallow onto the table below. The flame sputters whenever someone slams a mug down too hard, a tiny reminder that even here the spark of revolt is as fleeting as a candle flicker. Yet these poor benches are the true pulse of Rome's restless masses. The Forum may have thundered with senators' speeches, but here is where the city's anger fermented quietly, dangerously, in the soft shadows where the law rarely poked its nose. Next to you, a boy no older than 15 brags about a fight he saw in the alley last night. He mimics the punches, the shouts, the sudden quiet when someone pulled a knife. He crows that he'll join the city watch soon, once he's big enough to swing a club. Another man across the table laughs, swears the boy will never make it, then offers him a sip from his mug. It's cheap wine, half vinegar, but in this corner, it tastes like power. A quirky detail clings to these gatherings. Some taverns offered loyalty perks, Buy 10 cups, get one free. Surviving price lists scratched onto pottery shards show how owners tempted even the poorest to linger just a little longer, pouring coins into the night until their pockets rattled empty. Some scholars puzzle over whether these loyalty schemes were honest business tricks or subtle traps that kept the underclass right, where the powerful wanted them, sedated half hopeful, never quite angry enough to act. You catch your reflection in the bottom of a wine jug, distorted, rippling in the lamplight. It's easy to see yourself in these benches. Poor or rich, you'd need a place to mutter and moan to claim tomorrow would be better, even if tonight promised nothing more than a headache and a broken promise. A new round of laughs breaks out when someone stands too fast and knocks over a stool. The man sprawls on the gritty floor, curses, then clambers up again with a sheepish grin. No one helps him. They just scoot aside, let him climb back to his cheap seat and his cheaper dreams. A dog noses the spilled wine tail, wagging as if it knows the tavern's floors better than any patron. Some nights, these poor benches cradle conspiracies so quiet they never breathe past dawn. Other nights, the only thing born here is tomorrow's hangover. But in the lull between laughter and rants, you feel the fragile heartbeat of a city that promised riches to all and delivered them to few, leaving the rest to toast false hopes under flickering lamps. So you stay hunched with your elbows on splintered wood, a silent guest among Rome's half-drunk dreamers. Their stories float around you like sour smoke, drifting upward, drifting away. A slap of dice against wood snaps you out of your half-dream. Deeper in the tavern's back, past a curtain of ragged cloth meant to keep the draft out, and the secrets in men cluster around a battered table. They lean in faces, half lit by a guttering lamp, eyes locked on the clatter of bone dice that decide who eats tomorrow and who sleeps off a debt they can't repay. You squeeze through the haze of spilled wine and stale sweat until you're close enough to see the stakes, a handful of bronze coins, a chunk of dried fish, and the last dignity of a man who shouldn't be betting at all. The dice bounce once, twice, then settle crookedly beside a stain that might be old blood or last week's spilled garum sauce. The men murmur, check the roll, then argue if it counts. Gambling in Rome wasn't supposed to happen in public. Officially, dice games were banned for everyone but soldiers during certain festivals. In reality, the tavern floor was as good as any gaming hall better. Maybe because here, the risk of losing your shirt came with a refill of cheap courage. Dice or Aaliyah clacked across tables from dawn until the city's curfew bell. Historians still debate whether the ban on dice was ever more than a polite suggestion whispered to satisfy moralists. One fact that Styx excavations at Pompeii and Herculaneum uncovered dozens of dice carved from bone ivory, even cheap clay worn smooth from restless fingers. Some carried tiny scratches marks to cheat the odds when the toss could mean a meal or a beating. A crooked die in a crooked game for crooked dreams. At the table, a burly man in a ragged tunic curses his luck. He wipes his brow with a sleeve that smells of old oil and defeat. Across from him, a scrawny youth grins, scoops up the coins, and waves for another round. A shout erupts when someone accuses him of switching dice. A chair tips back, someone's mug smashes to the floor, and for a heartbeat, it seems the game will shift from chance to fists. But the barkeep's sharp eye catches the tension. He bangs an old amphora against the counter, a wordless warning that too much noise draws Rome's night watchmen who'll find the owner before dragging drunks into the cold. The barkeep's wife appears two arms folded tight. She's more feared than the city guards. Her glare alone sends the dice rolling again, this time quieter, meaner. There's a strange, almost endearing irony here. Rome's mighty empire ran on taxes and tributes, but its daily pulse was driven by petty bets and tiny debts rolling bones on sticky tavern boards. Scholars remain divided on whether these backroom games ruined more families than any war or famine. Some records hint at suicides scribbled into wills, debts lost at dice, a simple epitaph for a life unraveled, one bad roll at a time. A soft thud near your elbow draws your eye to a makeshift book, a scrap of wax tablet where someone's trying to keep score, though the wine's fog makes numbers swim. A crooked line here, a smeared tally there by dawn. No one will remember who owes who, but the barkeep always does. His wife, too. There's never mercy for unpaid tabs, only extra chores, or a bench to scrub in the cold. In a far corner, two regulars lean close over their own dice, whispering about a new trick, shaving one side so the six never shows. One pulls a tiny knife from his belt and flicks it open. They giggle like boys with stolen fruit. Maybe they'll cheat the game tonight. Maybe they'll cheat death tomorrow. Or maybe they'll lose it all to the barkeep's wife, who'll throw them into the alley when the last coin clinks dry. A tiny detail flickers behind it. All street kids sometimes snuck under tavern benches, snatching up dropped dice when drunks got too rowdy to notice. Some say the best dice makers in later centuries learned their craft under those tables, whittling tiny cubes that promise luck to the next fool. But surviving records are thin. Another detail scholars puzzle over half-truth and tavern tale entwined. You stand at the edge of the table as another roll lands, crooked coins change hands, and a laugh breaks the stale tension like a crack of thunder in a dusty alley. Somewhere beyond these flickering lamps, Rome's marble villas gleam cold and unreachable. But here in the glow of dice and debts, the city feels as raw and human as ever, fragile, reckless, and just one unlucky toss away from ruin. You pull back, leaving the gamblers to their quiet ruin, and drift toward the next corner, where hunger simmers louder than any argument. The dice clatter fades behind you as you slip through a curtain of greasy air and step back into the tavern's heart, where hunger hums as loudly as gossip. Rome's taverns weren't just rumor factories or backstreet casinos. They were the original fast food joints, serving up salty snacks that stuck to your ribs just long enough to soak up another cup of sour wine. Follow your nose to the corner where a street cook squats over a battered brazier, stoking coals with a broken fan made from palm fronds. Fat sizzles in a cracked clay pan as chunks of cheap pork sputter and spit. He sprinkles coarse salt with a showman's flourish, dragging a line of curiosity seekers closer. A handful of coins buys a handful of warmth, a greasy tidbit to hush the belly's growl. A boy tugs at his mother's tunic, pointing at the skewered sausages that glisten in the lamplight. She hushes him with a torn piece of bread dipped in Garum Rome's legendary fish sauce, so pungent it could drown out the tavern's other less polite odors. Across the room, a pair of day laborers shovel fried chickpeas into their mouths, each bean punctuating a rumor about a senator's latest lover, or a tax collector's missing purse. Their laughter bursts between mouthfuls louder when the wine dulls the taste of rancid oil. It's strange but true. Roman taverns fed people's stomachs just enough to keep their tongues loose. Surviving records show they sold more snacks than meals, pickled vegetables, smoked fish, cold lentil stew, spooned into bowls that never quite dried between uses. Some scholars argue this street-side snacking was the root of Europe's first true fast food culture, salt vinegar gossip repeat. A stray cat winds through the cook's feet, mewling for scraps. The cook kicks it gently away, but not too hard. He knows a few rodents will slip the cat a better dinner behind the stacked amphory anyway. That's Rome's tavern ecosystem. Scraps feed cats, cats chase rats, rats dodge the cook, and the cook feeds the drunks who pay for it all. Slide up to the brazier. Feel the heat lick your hands as the cook flips a small fish onto a slab of stale bread. A burst of garlic and brine rises with the steam. Someone beside you sighs he hasn't eaten since sunrise, but here one greasy snack is enough to buy him a seat at the roomer table for another hour. A drunk slurs about a governor's mistress, wiping fish oil on his sleeve, swearing he heard it from a legionnaire's cousin's friend. Nobody believes him, but everyone listens. It's cheaper than a play, tastier than a dry speech at the forum. A quirky sign swings from a beam above the cook's brazier, a painted fish with a crooked grin, its belly split open to spill coins instead of guts. Some scholars debate whether this was a joke about the cook's prices or a nod to the rumor that tavern cooks watered down garum to stretch profits. No surviving recipe proves it just one more whiff of suspicion that still tickles historians' noses centuries later. You lean against a damp pillar, chewing on a hunk of black bread that could break a tooth if you're not careful. The bread's stale, but the chatter is fresh. A man on your right mutters about a soldier's dice debt. The neighbor on your left argues about grain shipments stuck at Ostia. Somewhere in this messy knot of crumbs and rumors, you taste the city's real heartbeat, greasy, gritty half-truth and full appetite. Behind you, the cook slaps another sausage onto the coals grease popping like firecrackers. The brazier's glow flickers over faces lined by hunger and hope, each bite a small promise that tomorrow might be bearable if tonight's rumor turns out to be true. Or false doesn't matter, as long as it fills the silence while teeth chew and coins slip from palm to palm. A final detail sticks as you push away from the brazier. Some scholars wonder if these tavern snacks garum-dipped, smoke-touched cheap, as dirt shaped not just Rome's appetite, but the world's. Fast food, with a side of gossip centuries before golden arches or neon signs. Your bread's gone, your fingers smell of garlic and fish, and your ears hum with half-lies salted like the meat. Behind you, the cook's brazier flares again, feeding a city that never stops talking. You drift back toward the doorway, the warmth of food replaced by the colder bite of another whispered secret, waiting to be traded over the next cup. As you brush the crumbs from your tunic and duck through a new tangle of benches, your eyes drift upward toward the tavern's battered sign, swinging lazily above the door. It's a faded patch of painted plaster, nailed to a crooked beam, easy to miss in the tangle of shadows. But once you spot it, you can't help but grin a sloppy sketch of Bacchus belly round and eyes half shut, hoisting a wine jug bigger than his own head. Beneath him, a crude slogan curls around the wood in flaking red paint: drink, forget, repeat. Roman tavern signs were part advertisement, part warning, part inside joke. They called out to the weary, the reckless, the bored, offering warmth and wine in words that could mean one thing by day and something else entirely by night. If a sign promised the best wine in Rome, it was probably watered down twice before it hit your mug. If it winked with a pun about Bacchus's generosity, it really meant the barkeep's wife kept the strongest vintage locked up tight for the customers who could pay extra or pay in favors. A curious little fact: many of these signs survived longer than the taverns themselves. Pompeii's ghost town of frozen walls still blushes, with slogans half covered by ash sketches of wine jugs with cartoon faces crude jokes about drunks who couldn't find the door, and the occasional boast that good girls never come here. Some scholars argue the signs were more than decoration. They were the only advertising poor folk needed, simple enough to lure in the literate and the half-literate alike. Your sandals scuff over the threshold as you peer closer at another sign. This one boasts a painted amphora, dancing on stubby legs, chased by a tipsy centaur, waving a wine cup like a trophy. A single word curls beneath, in cracked black letters, satis, enough. Enough what? Enough wine to forget your debts, enough gossip to ruin your neighbor, or enough time to lose your last copper coin at dice, while your wife waits at home with cold lentils. No one knows for sure. Some researchers believe tavern owners loved double meanings as much as they loved cheap wine. In an empire stuffed with marble slogans and solemn inscriptions, the tavern sign was Rome's sly wink at itself, a joke that stuck to your boots as much as your tongue. A soft laugh drifts beside you. A pair of men lean on the tavern's doorframe, arguing about whether the painted centaur means the owner waters the wine or serves it strong enough to make you see mythic beasts. They toss half coins into a greasy palm bets made on a pun winnings to be drunk before sunrise. Inside, the barkeep's daughter wipes spilled wine from the floor with a rag that's seen better centuries. She glances up at the sign every time the door creaks open. That sign is her family's shield and bait. Its silly jokes guard the secrets that slip through these walls each night. A quirky detail, Roman law sometimes forced tavern owners to declare exactly what they sold by painting signs or hanging clay tablets above the door. Bread, wine, stew, nothing fancy, but the promise of it kept a drunk from stumbling into the wrong doorway. Some taverns broke the rules, offering unlisted extras, bribes passed under the table, or a quiet corner for illegal dice games. Surviving scraps of legal codes hint that inspectors rarely bothered to enforce these sign laws. They were probably busy drinking behind those same crooked doors. A sudden gust from the street flicks the sign back and forth, making the painted Bacchus bobble like he's laughing at you for taking any of it too seriously. Maybe that's the secret to these battered slogans, a reminder that even Rome's grand empire was propped up by backstreet joints where people laughed at rules they had no hope of changing. You pause at the threshold, eyes tracing the faded centaur one more time, then duck back inside. The gossip's warmer than the night air, and the promise above the door. Drink, forget, repeat echoes like an invitation you're too curious to ignore. Somewhere inside, another rumor's already coiling around your ears, waiting to hatch its own twisted truth. A new jug hits the counter with a dull thud, sour cheap, and technically speaking forbidden. You wander closer, following the sour sting that curls around your nose like a whispered dare. This wine, the roughest brew in the empire, was once so scandalous that Rome's moral guardians tried to ban it altogether. Picture it, the Senate marble columns, men in spotless togas, wagging fingers at the city's worst temptations. Behind closed doors, they drank the finest Falernian by the amphora, aged, spiced, sweet as scandal itself. But for the common drunks crowding this corner tavern, there was Laura, a harsh, watery mash squeezed from leftover grape skins, stomped twice strained through baskets that hadn't been cleaned since who knows when. Too cheap to tax properly, too sour to store, Laura made moralists nervous. If wine was Rome's social glue, Laura was the sticky mess underneath, easy to gulp, easier to abuse. Some surviving decrees thunder about moral decay of the city's youth, corrupted by gutter wine and loose talk. They tried fines, surprise raids, even threats of exile for tavern keepers caught serving banned blends. scholars still squabble over whether the bans were about drunkenness or the uncomfortable reality that too many plebs bonding over cheap drink could get ideas dangerous, rebellious half-baked ideas that didn't need Senate approval. You watch as the barkeep pours a mug of the forbidden stuff for an old man whose tunic looks like it once served as a horse blanket. He raises it in a silent toast, lips cracked, eyes bright with a mischief the Senate's moral panic could never wash away. Beside him, a pair of boys, barely old enough to grow a whisker, share a single cup, giggling every time they cough from the sour bite. A quirky snippet you might enjoy some taverns disguise Laura as vinegar or kitchen stock when inspectors came sniffing around. If soldiers burst through the door, demanding to see wine jars, the barkeep would point at barrels labeled acetum vinegar for cooking and wink while slipping the good stuff into cracked mugs under the counter. Whether that vinegar ever seasoned a stew is still up for debate. Historians find receipts for fish and garum, but rarely for tavern vinegar. Your shoulder brushes a flaking column where someone scratched a message: Vinum non cure culpa, wine carries no guilt. It drips irony as thick as the wine is thin. Rome's poor didn't care for Senate squeamishness. If the law banned cheap wine, then cheap wine just slipped behind closed doors, unlabeled, untaxed, unbothered by official scowls. A woman, at the end of the bar, argues with the barkeep about a half-empty jug. She insists he watered it down more than usual. He shrugs and claims the law forced him to. They both know it's a joke. There's no moral panic big enough to stop a tavern owner from stretching profit like a cheap tunic. And so, the banned wine flows darker than water, but not by much. Every mug poured is a shrug at authority, a wink at marble pillars, a reminder that you can decree a city sober on paper, but never in practice. Near your elbow, a boy scratches fresh letters into the column, Lex bibendi est vana. The drinking law is useless. He grins at you, proud of his little rebellion. Maybe tomorrow, he'll scrub floors for the barkeep's wife to pay off the sour mug he can't afford tonight. Or maybe he'll slip out the door pockets empty, but head spinning with secrets he's overheard. One final sip, one last dry laugh from the old man who raised his forbidden mug. Then the jug empties, the gossip shifts, and the night keeps humming with stories the Senate's moral panic could never silence. You lean back from the counter, warm from sour wine you never tasted, but can almost feel on your tongue. Cheap, coarse, and still too delicious for any law to truly kill. A sharp bark of laughter cuts through the lull as you turn away from the counter this time toward the real rulers of these smoky walls. Not emperors or senators, but the shrewd minds who made sure every spilled cup turned to profit the tavern owners. And tonight, you're about to meet one, her arms crossed tight as a wine barrel, and her eyes sharper than any dagger hidden under a drunk's cloak. Near the back, behind a battered plank, serving as a bar, she stands guard over her domain, a woman of maybe 40 hair, pinned in loops that threaten to come undone every time she jerks her head at a lazy server. Her voice cuts through the din like a chisel on marble. Pay first. Spill it, pay again. There's no mistaking who's in charge here. It might surprise you to know how many of Rome's taverns, these so-called dens of vice and ruin, were run not by burly ex-soldiers or back-alley thugs, but by freedwomen. Some once belonged to wealthy households, learned how books balance better than drunk men, then clawed their way to independence one mug at a time. Surviving tablets, mostly dull debt records, paint an oddly vivid picture. Women who kept ledgers tighter than any man's purse, who sued customers for unpaid tabs, who knew the magistrate's weak spot and the guard captain's secret mistress. A quirky footnote: these women often use their taverns as quiet fronts for side trades, lending coins at steep interest, hiring out spare rooms for gossip-heavy meetings, even arranging hush-hush deals that had nothing to do with watered-down wine. Some scholars argue the tavern's back room was where a good portion of Rome's petty black market thrived, tucked safely behind the distraction of laughter and drunken brawls. You watch as tonight's tavern matron leans over the counter to count coins dropped by a farmer whose breath smells of stale onions and regret. She bites one bronze piece just to show him she'll know if it's fake, then slips it into a clay jar, already rattling with tonight's take. She nods to a barmaid who's hovering nearby, a silent command that means keep an eye on him. He looks like the type to slip out the door when the jug runs dry. Behind her, shelves bow under the weight of amphorae, sealed with wax and hope. Some carry the cheapest Laura, some the better brew, saved for a loyal few men who pay in silver or in secrets worth even more. One battered ledger sits open on a barrel. If you peeked closer, you'd find debts names, scribbles that mean ruin or mercy, all penned in a hand neat enough to shame a temple scribe. She catches you staring. For a moment, her eyes hold yours steady, measuring, as if deciding whether you'd be worth the trouble if you drank and ran. A flicker of a smirk tells you what you already know: you wouldn't get 2 steps before one of her regulars blocked the door. Some say these freedwomen learned their craft from brothel madams, equal parts mother, merchant, and mercenary. Others insist tavern owners wrote their own rules. Keep the drink flowing, keep the gossip sweet, keep the trouble just under control. No scholar fully agrees, but the stories left behind, bits of graffiti, half-burned contracts, accidental mentions in court cases, hint that behind every good Roman tavern was a woman who'd sell you wine with one hand and an alibi with the other. A young server bumps past you, balancing 2 brimming mugs and trying not to flinch when the matron's voice snaps out another order: wipe the counter when he's done. And if he spills it, that's another coin. She's not here to charm or coax. She's here to make sure the same loose lips that spread gossip keep spreading coins across her counter. One last fact before you drift away: historians found curses scratched into tavern walls, threats against thieves, unpaid debts, lovers who broke promises. Some bear women's names, and some guess they belong to these sharp-eyed tavern queens, leaving a mark more lasting than any marble statue of an emperor who never once scrubbed a wine stain off a sticky bench. The matron slams the lid on her coin jar, sweeps a stray copper into her apron, and shouts for more firewood. Another night, another few dozen secrets traded for mugs that never quite stay full. The empire's marble heart may beat in the forum, but its blood runs sticky here through the hands of women who knew exactly how to keep it flowing. You step back into the swirl of noise, your ear still echoing with the clink of coins, your mind half full of stories only she could tell if she ever felt like sharing. The barkeep's wife, or the tavern's real queen, if you're being honest, vanishes through a creaking door behind the counter, leaving the floor to the nimble feet and sharper ears of her barmaids. You catch one of them now, a slim girl, weaving through tilted stools with 2 mugs balanced in each hand, skirts hitched just high enough to avoid the worst of the spilled wine soaking the rushes underfoot. She pauses near your elbow to wedge a full mug in front of a merchant half slumped over his own table. Her fingers brush his shoulder softly enough to wake him firmly enough to remind him he still owes for the last round. He mumbles a slurred compliment, tries to catch her wrist. She's gone before his fingers close, already sliding into the shadows to refill another man's secrets. Barmaids in Rome's corner taverns did more than fetch mugs and wipe crumbs. They were the quiet engines of rumor, the hidden librarians of half-truths and overheard confessions. Too lowborn to be trusted by polite society, too crucial to be ignored by those who needed a secret slipped across town, they balanced drinks, debts, and gossip like jugglers with no net. A curious fact worth savoring scraps of graffiti, half rude, half flattering, survive on Pompeii's tavern walls, naming certain serving girls as sweet-voiced, sharp-tongued, or simply the one who knows. Some lines hint at hush money, paid to keep a slip of overheard talk from wandering too far. Historians puzzle over how much power these girls wielded, unwritten, unseen, yet clinking in every mug they carried. One barmaid passes you, now her braid looped tight against her neck to keep curious fingers at bay. She shoots you a look, curious, calculating. Did you just hear the senator's nephew promise his vote for a bribe? Did you catch that merchant's slurred threat to poison his rival's wine? She'll remember your face, tuck it beside the dozen other faces she memorizes each night. Maybe she'll sell that memory tomorrow, tucked in a whisper, to a new patron with deeper pockets and looser lips. Near the hearth, an older barmaid leans against a pillar, pretending not to watch a group of traders gesturing over clay cups. Their talk drifts her way. Grain shipments delayed. At Ostia, a warehouse guard bribed to look the other way. A half-joke about setting fire to the dockmaster's books. She barely shifts, but you can see her eyes flick toward the door where the tavern's mistress disappeared moments ago. Whatever these men say tonight will likely end up in that locked ledger before dawn. A quirky detail dances on the edge of rumor and fact. Some tavern maids doubled as matchmakers or go-betweens for liaisons that needed to stay off the official scrolls. A nod here, a murmured promise their wives found. Lovers, rivals, found leverage, blackmail, found its sharpest teeth, not in palaces, but behind battered tavern counters. There's no tidy court record for any of it, just hints buried in satire and scandalous poetry, enough to keep scholars guessing centuries later. You lean closer to the bar as a serving girl sidles past. She flashes a tired grin that doesn't quite reach her eyes, a polite armor she's worn since her first spilled jug, and whispered insult. She's heard it all: who owes what, who sleeps where, who's paying tonight for the sins they'll swear off tomorrow. Maybe she's paid extra for staying silent. Maybe she tucks every rumor away like coins in her apron. Maybe she forgets everything the moment the lamps gutter out. She spins away, gone again, before you can think of a question. Another mug lands on another table. Another name drifts through the hum of the room. The city outside might crush people like her beneath marble and law, but in here, the barmaid stands taller than any statue, anonymous, yet essential, invisible, yet irreplaceable. A cup clinks on the counter beside you. Warm, stale, sour. Just the way the rumor mill likes it. You raise it to your lips as the barmaid vanishes into the laughter and lies that keep Rome humming through another restless night. Your cup's nearly dry when you drift toward a low table wedged under a cracked arch, where tonight's chatter hums louder than the barkeep's coin jar. Here words cost less than wine, but sometimes buy far more dangerous things: votes, favors, protection promises. This corner, sticky with spilled wine and stale sausage grease, is Rome's unofficial campaign office, and you're about to see why. A squat man in a too-fine tunic leans forward, his rings glinting in the smoky lamplight. He's not here for the cheap Laura. He's here for the ears, dozens of them, half sober, hungry for a free round. He waves a hand, and a barmaid darts over with mugs that slosh wine across the battered table. The squat man grins his teeth a little too white for this place. He doesn't bother with flowery speeches. He slips coins to the barkeep, nods at the crowd, then waits for the liquor to do the persuading. This is Rome's open secret taverns were more than rumor mills or dice dens. They were political machines in clay and wood. Surviving graffiti scratched into tavern walls, prove-it campaign slogans for local ediles or would-be senators carved by drunks who couldn't write a love letter but knew exactly how to spell a name when a free cup depended on it. One mainstream fact anchors it all: buying votes was illegal, but so common that candidates barely pretended to hide it. The law might slap a fine on blatant bribery in the forum, but in the back room of a popina, a jug of wine and a whispered promise were just hospitality. Some scholars still debate whether any election in Rome's chaotic city wards was won honestly or just marinated overnight in cheap Falernian. You press closer, elbow to elbow, with a stonemason who grunts approval every time the man in the fine tunic drops a joke about the last fool we elected. The air crackles with half-laughed threats: raise the grain tax again and see what happens. Look the other way when your buddy's shop accidentally catches fire. Politics here isn't about marble pillars. It's about who owes who: a drink, a vote, a rumor, a favor that can't be put back in the bottle once it's poured. A quirky twist floats on the stale wine vapors. Historians think some taverns were so notorious for election plotting that rival candidates posted spies behind the bar. Barkeep's cousins trusted servers, that kid who pretends to sweep sawdust, but knows exactly who's promising what. A nod to the barkeep's wife, a slip of copper under a mug. Information moved faster than any official decree could hope to keep up. Near the wall, a patch of plaster bears faint scratches. Marcus buys, better wine vote, Marcus. Below it, someone scribbled a crude reply. Marcus waters it down. The barkeep laughs when he sees you reading. He says nothing. His grin says he's seen 100. Marcus's come and go, promises spilling out, like wine half as cheap and twice as sour. One man older than the rest raises his cup to the squat politician, but his voice cuts through the laughter with a mocking edge. Tell us again how you'll fix the grain ships. The candidate shifts smiles too wide. He launches into another story full of half-promises and full cups. No one really believes him, but no one really cares. The wine's free tonight, and tomorrow's rumor is worth more than today's truth. Behind you, the barmaid drifts through the knot of half-voters, half-drunk, collecting empty mugs and new secrets at the same time. She's already storing who toasted who muttered a bribe, who might change sides by morning. Some whispers she'll keep, some she'll sell. None will stay in this room for long. The candidate pounds the table calls for one last jug. The barkeep obliges. He knows the cost of keeping Rome's rumor river flowing is always a few coins lighter than the cost of stopping it. As the mugs clink, promises float into the air, like steam off a pot of stale stew, gone as soon as they're spoken, but sticky enough to cling to whoever needs to remember them next. You lean back your head, spinning not from wine, but from the sweet, sour taste of a city that believes in votes the same way it believes in watered wine if enough people pretend maybe it works. Or maybe it just keeps the tavern full for another night. Outside the streets, echo with the footsteps of watchmen who'll pretend not to know what's happening inside. Inside, you watch a promise change hands for the price of one more round. And somewhere in this clatter of mugs and muttered deals, Rome's next petty tyrant might be buying his first seat of power one cheap cup at a time. Slip past the last round of political cheer, and you'll find yourself at the tavern's true archive. No scrolls, no scribes, just raw thoughts etched into walls that never cared for permission. Rome's taverns wore their memories in scratches and scrawls, each mark a testament to nights too long and tongues too loose. Run your fingers along the plaster near your shoulder. Beneath centuries of grime, you trace crude letters, half an insult, half a confession. Gaius owes 3 cups. Beside it, a smaller line Julia never paid. Some words are half-finished, like their authors passed out mid-carve. Others bite deep rage pressed through a stolen stylus or a broken shard of amphora. Graffiti in Rome was more than bathroom scribbles. Here the walls sang with gossip that couldn't be shouted aloud, debt, desire, betrayal. While senators carved edicts into marble, the city's true voice rasped in these backstreet slogans and insults. Pompeii's frozen tavern walls prove it lovers' names tangled with curses, stick figure sketches, mocking rivals, even the odd philosophical jab about life's shortness between mugs. One fact scholars love to repeat tavern graffiti is where you see Rome, raw, uncensored, unpolished, the empire's underbelly drawn in crooked lines. Some scrawlings beg forgiveness for spilled secrets. Others brag about deeds better left unspoken. The fancy inscriptions on monuments might claim Rome's glory, but these backroom scratches boast its real pulse, petty, 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 and endlessly human. A barmaid drifts past you, rag in hand, pretending not to see a new insult blooming under her lamp's flicker. She could scrub it away, but she won't. The walls speak for themselves, and a blank patch is just an invitation for tomorrow's drunk to add his truth reel. Or invented, it hardly matters. You catch one quirk that sticks some tavern owners charged extra to let patrons carve messages. A copper coin bought you a line 2 coins, and you could scratch over someone else's insult, rewriting your reputation one letter at a time. Scholars still argue if this was just petty fun, or a side hustle that kept barkeeps flush when wine ran dry. A man near the doorway squints at the wall, reading lines aloud for his table. He slaps the back of a friend. Look says your sister was here with that fishmonger. Says she's cheap. The table roars. Mugs clink. And another rumor flies free unstoppable as the wine stains spreading on the floor. Not all the words slice. Some scratchings are soft confessions. Lovers who never met again. Prayers for luck at tomorrow's dice game. Lonely wishes for a warm bed or a full belly. They linger in the stone like ghosts you can almost hear if you lean close enough. You pause before one final line tucked behind a splintered beam where few eyes bother to look. We drink. We love. We forget. 3 tiny words that sum up the room better than any Senate decree. The barkeep's wife once told a passing scribe to copy it down. He never did. But here it remains buried under newer insults, stubborn as an old stain. Step back, eyes half shut, the hum of the tavern, swallowing your thoughts. These walls hold more stories than the city's finest libraries, crude, cruel, tender, and always unfinished. Somewhere beyond the scratched plaster, Rome's statues stand cold and perfect under the moon. But in here, history stays warm, etched by a drunk's steady hand immortal, so long as someone bothers to run a fingertip over stone and wonder who left it behind. You drift along the wall one last time, letting the insults, boasts, and half-forgotten secrets press against your palm, proof that the empire's greatest gossip never really dies. It just waits for another mug, another whisper, another fool, with a stylus to carve tomorrow's truth. Past the insults and half-carved threats, you find yourself tucked in a darker corner where the lamps burn lower, the laughter softens, and the hush of secrets slips into something sweeter, or at least more reckless. Here gossip runs warm as spilled wine winding its way from rumor to touch to a kiss that tastes of sour grapes and cheap promises. Roman taverns weren't just rumor dens and dice pits. They were tinderboxes for half-whispered love affairs, tangled flings that bloomed and wilted in the span of a single night. Some stayed secret, others carved their regrets into the very walls you just touched. You settle into a creaking bench, close enough to feel the thrill of scandal seeping through the shadows. Lean closer, and you'll spot them, a young man and a girl in a faded green stola, their knees brushing beneath a battered table sticky with last night's arguments. He laughs too loud. She hushes him with fingers on his lips, eyes darting to the barkeep's wife who pretends not to notice. She knows the game: keep the wine flowing. Let the trysts bloom, so long as coins drop with each empty mug. One mainstream fact worth murmuring to yourself: Roman taverns were infamous for such entanglements. Love affairs flourished in corners where neighbors pretended not to see. Some poor souls found real devotion here, half-drunken courtships that stumbled into marriage beds. Others found heartbreak sold in the same cracked mugs that held the night's wine. Some scholars loved to argue over whether tavern girls doubled as courtesans, or whether that's just the Senate's tidy smear to keep respectable wives away from cheap counters and cheaper secrets. Truth is harder to pin down. Graffiti in Pompeii shows blessings to Venus scratched beside crude jokes about who went home with whom. No historian has found a tidy scroll that says who was lover, who was liar, who was fool. Maybe that's the best proof the tavern walls ever left behind. Love never kept receipts. A quirky sliver of the story hides in surviving love spells scratched on lead tablets buried under tavern thresholds. Desperate patrons would slip a coin to the barmaid who'd pass it to a soothsayer, promising to bind a lover's heart or break a rival's bed. Some tablets beg Venus to make a wandering husband return. Others snarl curses at false sweethearts who vanish before dawn. These spells never made it to the Senate's marble floors, but in a back room with sticky benches, they shaped more lives than any law. Across the table, the young man brushes hair from the girl's cheek. He brags about a better job, waiting in Ostia gold, enough to buy her a silk tunic, maybe even a tiny house with an oven that doesn't spit ash into the soup. She smiles, half believing, half hoping the wine keeps him gentle for another hour. The barkeep's wife watches from her post by the door. She's seen this same story 100 times, same promises, same awkward first kisses, same heartbreak, drifting out the door at dawn. A soft sigh pulls your gaze to the next bench. An older pair sits there, shoulders touching, but eyes turned away, former lovers maybe, or spouses, too weary to bicker in front of strangers. He sips his cup with a stare that drifts through the greasy haze. She taps her foot against his, a small comfort that says, "We're still here." Not every tavern tryst ends with slammed doors and fresh insults carved into plaster. One last detail: some love, born over wine barrels, left children behind tiny ghosts hidden in city records under cryptic notations about unclaimed offspring. No tablets name their fathers. No fancy inscriptions mark their mothers. But the taverns remember, in their own way, one secret, one rumor, one half-sobbed promise at a time. You rise from the bench, slipping past the couple still tangled in tomorrow's broken vow. The room hums with warm secrets, kisses hidden behind chipped jugs, laughter softening the bite of promises everyone knows will fade with the lamps. Step lightly as you drift back to the main hall. There's a fight brewing over spilled wine, but for now, the gossip corner hums with hope. fleeting foolish sweet as sour wine on a lover's breath. A clay mug topples from someone's hand, maybe an accident, maybe not, and crashes onto the sticky floor with a dull crack. For one heartbeat, the tavern holds its breath. The soft hum of gossip shivers into silence. Then a voice, too loud, too angry, slices through the hush like a dagger scraping a whetstone. You turn just as a man lurches to his feet, wine dripping from his sleeve. His eyes lock on the boy beside him. Barely grown tunic, stained with cheap Laura, and pride too fresh to swallow. Around them, benches scrape back a clearing in the crush of bodies, an unspoken invitation for the night's first real trouble. Tavern fights were as Roman as olive oil and back-alley bribes. Spilled wine, rigged dice, whispered slights. They were sparks looking for dry kindling. Surviving scraps of legal tablets remind us brawls in taverns were so common, the city guards had a price list for fines. Broken nose, chipped tooth, cracked amphora, each cost a few coins if you survived the night to pay. You lean into a pillar's shadow as the older man's shout thickens with threats. He owes me another jug. The boy jabs a finger back. Your hands rig the dice. 2 truths, or maybe 2 lies. It hardly matters now. The barkeep's wife watches from her post behind the counter, lips pressed tight. She's seen this dance wine to rumor to grudge to fists. A stool clatters to the floor legs, splintering like ribs. A circle forms mugs, grip tight, eyes wide, a quiet thrill running through the smoke. A good fight is free entertainment when the wine's gone warm and the gossip grows stale. One fact scholars like to toss into their footnotes: some gladiators were known to drink here, slipping from the arena's roar to the tavern's hush, their fists still hungry for bruises when the games were done. Rumors claim you could tell by the scars and the way the crowd held its breath, because when a brawl turned serious and a blade flashed under a cloak, the guards might come too late to charge a fine. A sudden shove, a bark of laughter, someone bets 2 coppers on the boy. Someone else hisses they'll back the older man. Coins slip across grimy palms, even as the pair circle each other in salts thick as spit. A barmaid watches one eye on the exit, the other on the barkeep's wife, who taps a knuckle on the counter. Not yet, that signal says. Let them swing once, twice, then step in before blood costs us more than cheap drama. A quirky detail. Some taverns had unspoken rules: break the mugs, pay the barkeep, break a nose, pay the healer next door. But break the peace too badly, spill blood in front of the wine casks, and the owner might ban you for life, or worse, invite you back tomorrow with a hidden debt you'd pay in secrets. The boy lunges first, a clumsy swing that glances off a shoulder. The older man roars back fists like hammers pounding a door that won't open. A table tips bread rolls, scatter wine soaks a sleeping drunk's sleeve. He wakes just long enough to cheer for the chaos, then flops back down, mumbling for another cup. Somewhere near your elbow, a soft voice murmurs, "Odds coins change hands again." This is as Roman as any marble forum. No orators, no laws, just spilled drink and red faces, fists for punctuation when words run out. A punch lands. A grunt. The circle ripples with a cheer and a hiss. One more swing, and the boy's pride smacks the floor before his back does. The older man snorts. Spitz reaches for the jug. He claims he's owed. He doesn't see the barkeep's wife step in. She grabs the jug, smacks his knuckles, points him toward the door, with a glare sharper than any blade under a cloak. The circle breaks. Laughter swallows tension, and the tavern exhales another feud, spent another rumor born. Outside these cracked walls, Rome might pretend its order runs on marble and scrolls. Inside, it runs on spilled mugs, bruised egos, and the barkeep's wife reminding every drunk that their seat here is softer than a cell in the city watch's grimy barracks. The boy wipes his lip blood and cheap wine mingling on his chin. He staggers up, pride battered, but rumor proof. By dawn, someone will claim he knocked the man flat. By noon, someone else will swear he lost a tooth instead. Historians never agree on these fights, too small to write down, too loud to forget. You step back as the circle reforms into benches and murmurs. Another jug appears, more secrets slip from lip to lip. Rome's empire might crumble one day, but tonight its taverns hold fast, rowdy, reckless, stubborn as any legion. And somewhere behind the barkeep's wife counts her coins, one eye on the door, in case another fight wants to try its luck. The brawl's ghost still lingers in the stale air, an echo of fists, a smear of spilled wine drying on rushes underfoot. But before the tavern can settle back into its usual hum of half-lies and half-full mugs, the door swings wide, ushering in a gust of night air, and something colder, still the city's moral keepers. Two figures slip through, first torches in hand, the flicker of flame reflected off dull bronze helmets. Behind them, a third man, shoulders hunched under a cloak, heavy with borrowed authority. He scans the tavern like he's sniffing out sin itself, which here is about as easy as finding a puddle in the Tiber. Crackdowns were Rome's favorite bedtime story, told by the Senate to soothe its own conscience. Laws, scribbled in neat lines, on wax tablets declared when taverns could open how much wine they could serve, whom they could let inside. And every few seasons, some new edict roared through the streets, promising virtue in place of vice. Surviving legal scraps list the same offenses over and over: gambling, indecency, secret plots. Enough excuses to rattle a tavern door at midnight and drag the unlucky out by their collars. You watch as the lead enforcer strides to the counter. The barkeep's wife stiffens her jaw, working a word she swallows before it escapes. She's been here before she knows this game. A bribe costs less than a smashed wine jug or a night in a cold cell. But tonight, the enforcer wants a show. He lifts a torch, letting its glow crawl into corners where lovers whisper and dice still clatter. He sniffs the air, like he can smell illegal Laura from 3 benches away. His voice snaps the hush like a whip. Who owns this wine? The barkeep shrugs, wipes his hands on his apron, points at an empty barrel he swears is vinegar. A soft lie that drips truer than any Senate decree. One fact scribbled into the city's dusty law ledgers: Rome's leaders never truly wanted the taverns gone. They needed them, needed the gossip to leak somewhere harmless, needed the poor to drain their anger into mugs instead of riots. But they needed the threat too, the ritual performance of moral panic, the performance of a raid to keep the scribes busy and the senators smug. A young server freezes by the hearth, holding a half-filled jug that's suddenly more incriminating than gold hidden under a mattress. The enforcer spots him, gestures with a flick of fingers. Coins might hush this, but not tonight. Tonight someone must pay the price for the Senate's spotless conscience. A quirky, historical twist. Some decrees tried to limit tavern hours to daylight-only nonsense when Rome's best gossip thrived after dusk. Others banned taverns within shouting distance of temples or schools, as if a stone wall could keep a rumor from slipping through. Historians argue whether these crackdowns worked at all. Most agree they didn't. The same scrolls that thunder moral virtue also record fines unpaid, and tavern doors swinging open again the next night. Beside you, a patron mutters under his breath, "They'll close this one tonight?" He drains the last dregs of his cup anyway. No point wasting good sour wine on Senate virtue. Another man hunches lower, pushing a stolen die deeper into his tunic. If the guards search him, he'll swear he found it in the gutter. The barkeep's wife leans in. Voice a whisper, meant for the enforcer's ear alone. A promise, a threat, maybe a quiet offer. No historian can say what deals were struck in these torchlit corners. The torch sputters as if it wants to blow out this charade itself. Then, as sudden as they came, the city's enforcers nod once, a signal lost on any scroll, but plain as daylight to the tavern's regulars. Tonight's crackdown ends not with a smashed jug or a dragged drunk, but with a quiet pocketed coin and a half-hearted warning: close early. Keep them sober. The barkeep's wife nods, once lips tight. She's kept worse promises. As the enforcers vanish through the door, the gossip surges back like water rushing into a drained cup. The boy by the hearth sets the jug down. The lovers in the corner exhale their secret back into the shadows. Rome's crackdown drifts off into the night, another rumor to season tomorrow's gossip. And somewhere behind the counter, the barkeep's wife checks her coin jar, lighter than it should be, but cheaper than a raid that leaves splinters and unpaid debts in its wake. You sink onto a bench by the wall, warm torchlight still flickering in your eyes. One more fact to dream on: the city never really shut its taverns down. It just cracked the door open again the moment the guards turned the corner. Rome's gossip always finds its way back, poured from a jug, whispered into the dark, stubborn as spilled wine soaking rushes that no torchlight ever fully burns away. The last torch's glow has barely faded when the tavern exhales again, chairs scraping back into place, a jug clinking against a chipped mug, a half-laughed insult floating back to life. If the Senate's moral watchmen hope to scare the city sober, the only thing they've done tonight is give the gossip another tale to chew over for weeks to come. Outside, the night folds around Rome's cracked streets, but inside, the final dregs of cheap wine still swirl in mugs, held by men and women who know the city never really sleeps, at least not where rumor needs a place to warm its feet. You lean against the back wall, now the heat of the hearth gone, but the air still thick with soft talk. A pair of young drinkers argue about a new tavern 2 streets over, claims it's bigger, louder, boasts amphorae, stacked floor to ceiling. But every laugh, every nod, every foot that doesn't move from this sticky floor says the same thing. There's comfort in the familiar ruin of the corner papana. And if you tilt your mind forward across centuries of shifting stones and forgotten street names, you'll find the same story smoldering in a modern echo. The neighborhood pub at the block's edge, the greasy diner with cracked stools, where night owls trade half-truths over bottomless mugs of burnt coffee. The bar where nobody listens, yet everyone overhears. A sturdy fact to toast your drifting thoughts: historians often note how Roman taverns carved the blueprint for Europe's future pubs and inns. Long benches, shared mugs, cheap bites salty enough to pull thirst from dry throats, and above all, the unspoken promise that as long as the doors swing open, the secrets inside will never stay put for long. A soft laugh to your left, an old man, hair gone thin, as his coins brags he drank with a gladiator once. Maybe he did. Maybe he didn't. Either way, his voice weaves into the room's hum, a rumor so gentle it doesn't matter if it's true. The barmaid humors him, nodding, slipping him a splash of wine she'll charge him for tomorrow. A quirky footnote flickers behind the counter. The barkeep's wife dips her rag into a battered bucket, scrubs a patch of wall where a new insult has just been carved. She leaves the name half-finished. No point erasing all of it. There's always another rumor waiting to take its place. Your eyes roam the benches one last time, dice tumbling near the hearth lovers, half hiding in the corner. Where the lamps burn low, a traitor scribbling lines on a wax tablet he'll swear tomorrow he never wrote. Some stories here will drift out the door at dawn. Some will linger in half-remembered curses and smudged lines of graffiti. A few, if they're lucky, will wrap themselves around the throat of Rome's history and squeeze hard enough to echo down the centuries. You rise, feeling the night's weight press into your shoulders. One last sip of stale wine, one last scrape of sandal on the rush-strewn floor. Somewhere, the city's marble arches gleam under moonlight cold, perfect untouched by the petty truths and warm lies brewed in places like this. But you know where the real Rome lives. Not on columns or scrolls, but here on sticky benches, cracked mugs, whispered confessions that flutter against tavern beams like bats waiting for dawn. And when the lamps gutter out and the barkeep's wife bars the door for good, you can trust tomorrow's tavern will open its crooked sign to the street, waggle its painted pun at passing drunks, and carry every rumor forward like a torch that never quite goes out. So lift your cup, real or imagined, and feel the ghost of a Roman tavern settle warm in your chest. Tomorrow's gossip is already brewing, and somewhere, 2,000 years away, your neighborhood pub tips its hat to the same cheap secrets traded over a sticky counter and a laugh that never needed marble to last. Step past the bar's fading laughter out into Rome's streets, where another kind of gathering place waits not for drinking, but for something just as communal, just as revealing. The marble stays, but the whispers shift tone. You step inside Rome's bustling forum, the sun dipping behind temple roofs, and there it is, a low stone building, its arched doorway spilling out a damp, familiar scent, public latrines. Far from hidden corners, these toilet blocks stand right next to markets, bathhouses, and busy streets. Inside, rows of smooth marble seats line the walls, each hole perfectly carved, each gap between wide enough for an elbow, but not for shame. A thin stream of water gurgles along the base, carrying waste into the city's intricate sewer web. Romans believed that clean streets meant a strong city. Cloaca Maxima, the great sewer, was a source of pride flowing beneath the feet of emperors and beggars alike. Yet for all its engineering brilliance, stepping inside a public latrine was stepping into a paradox: shared privacy, collective relief, whispered scandal. One fact sticks out: some of these latrine halls could seat 20, 30, even 50 people at once. Imagine rows of togas, hitched up sandals tapping the mosaic floors, and conversations ranging from last night's gladiator match to a neighbor's scandalous affair. The lack of partitions wasn't an oversight, it was intentional. Romans treated these spaces like social clubs, places where you could empty more than just your bowels. Historians still argue whether this communal spirit grew out of practicality or performance. Some say the Roman obsession with open toilets reflected their civic pride, a way to demonstrate the empire's wealth of clean water and advanced plumbing. Others suspect it was just another excuse for men, and in some places, women, to network and gossip under the guise of natural business. One quirky detail stands out among the stone and marble: the low hum of conversation was sometimes interrupted by flute players and hired entertainers. Yes, In the grand halls of Roman sanitation, you might relieve yourself to the sound of live music echoing off damp walls. Scholars remain puzzled by inscriptions that hint at these toilet troubadours. Were they meant to drown out embarrassing noises, or simply to keep patrons loitering, spending more time to chat, joke, and spread news? And as you settle into the stone bench, metaphorically, of course, picture the daily flow of people from every walk of Roman life. Merchants, soldiers, even senators, brushing shoulders with slaves and servants. Children might run errands outside. Families waited, rumors dripped like the endless water trickling below. In these echoing halls, a bit of Rome's soul found its way into the pipes, stories whispered above the splash carried away through the tunnels that still pulse under the city's ancient bones. So linger here with me in this marble echo chamber, where empire met excrement and prestige meant never having to dig a backyard pit again. There's a chill draft brushing past your ankles, a faint trickle of water that never quite stops. Welcome to the second curiosity of Rome's public latrines, an innovation both ingenious and, well, unsettling: the shared sponge. Yes, you read that right. A sponge on a stick. Picture it now: rows of marble seats, each hole above a flowing channel of water. By your feet, a shallow gutter of cleanish water trickles, endlessly fed by Rome's aqueducts. Resting nearby are communal sticks tipped with soft sea sponges, known as a tersorium. Romans didn't fuss with rolls of papyrus or wads of cloth. No, they preferred the sponge dipped and wrung out, used and rinsed, then politely left for the next visitor. It sounds cringe-worthy now, but for ancient Rome, it was normal. They believed that running water constantly flushing and washing kept things clean enough. To a Roman citizen, the sponge wasn't gross, it was practical. They'd reach down, swish it in the channel, do their business, rinse, repeat. One mainstream fact: historians confirm that these sponge sticks were found all over the empire, from Britain's cold outposts to the bustling heart of the Forum. It wasn't just a city quirk, it was standard hygiene. Roman soldiers even carried smaller versions when marching: a sponge attached to a stick or bone handle, sometimes perfumed with vinegar or salt water for cleanliness. Quirkier still, there's evidence that sponges were so important they were even stolen. Small graffiti curses scratch curses at thieves who borrowed the community sponge and failed to return it. Yes, a public health crisis Roman style. Researchers continue to debate whether the sponge system was truly sanitary. Some argue that constant running water kept bacteria at bay. Others suggest that parasites and illnesses probably spread all the same. After all, when dozens of people share one sponge, there's only so much a trickle of aqueduct water can do. You can almost hear the awkward shuffle, see the hesitant glance as you wait your turn. Do you trust the sponge today, or just hope the next visitor is as polite with rinsing as you were? This simple stick, soggy and communal, tells us more about Rome's mix of genius and discomfort than 1,000 marble temples ever could. Here, you're reminded that luxury and cringe lived side by side, an empire obsessed with cleanliness, but fine with sharing sponges. It's enough to make you grateful for modern plumbing, toilet paper, and locks on stall doors. For the Romans, though, it was all just part of the daily routine. So next time you wander through the ruins of an old latrine, look down at that tiny gutter of water and picture the sponge floating gently by, an unspoken bond between strangers who trusted each other's hygiene just enough. You shuffle along the marble bench, adjusting your tunic, the echo of dripping water filling the silence when conversation lulls. But silence never lasts long here, because Rome's toilets weren't just for business below the waist. They were lively hubs of chatter, laughter, argument, and rumor. Welcome to the unfiltered, unpartitioned world of Roman toilet talk. Imagine this. It's midday, the forum buzzes outside, and the latrine seats are nearly full. Merchants rest their tired feet. Soldiers ease off heavy gear. A senator's nephew ducks in, hoping to catch a snippet of gossip worth peddling. The air is thick, partly with the earthy smell of humanity, partly with the spice of rumor. One undeniable fact: these public latrines doubled as social clubs, a place to sit and talk politics, trade news, strike deals, or gripe about taxes. Historians often joke that more than one backroom deal started over a sponge-on-a-stick handshake. While the Senate thundered with grand debates, the toilets hummed with everyday intrigue. A quirky detail still scribbled on the stone fragments of conversation carved right above the seats. One scrap mocks a local politician's bald spot. Another records a joke about a rival's lack of performance. It's toilet humor, in the literal sense, as timeless as it is crude. Some scholars remain divided on just how formal these chats could get. Did senators genuinely hatch plots here? Or was it mostly small talk and scandal? Surviving letters hint at secret handshakes, coded whispers, and whispered threats that started among the marble benches and followed their owners back into Rome's grander halls. It's not hard to imagine a grain merchant bribing a tax collector over a shared sponge rinse. It wasn't only men either. Though most large latrines were male spaces, smaller facilities sometimes admitted women, especially in mixed public baths. A mother might perch next to her child, a slave girl wait nearby to help her mistress lift layers of stola. Between the scraping of sandals and the trickling water, voices blended, some calm and chatty, others harsh with insult. Picture yourself here now, the stone seat cold under your thighs, a neighbor so close you can feel his tunic brush your elbow when he shifts. He leans over, muttering about a new law that will raise the grain tax. You nod politely, half listening, half counting how many people use that sponge today. Maybe you add your own grumble about the smell, the gossip, the heat. And just like that, you're part of Rome's messy democracy, equal on the marble seat, equal under the eye of Cloacina. There's something oddly comforting about it, this open secret of shared space and shared words. It's a reminder that power isn't always held in marble forums or glittering palaces. Sometimes it's passed hand to hand in places nobody wants to admit they lingered. In Rome, that place just happened to smell like vinegar and stale perfume. The next time you see an ancient ruin labeled public latrine, don't snicker and walk past. Linger. Listen for the echo of centuries-old jokes, the ghostly murmur of deals made and broken, the soft splash of water carrying secrets away. Here on cold stone, Rome's empire sat side by side, pants hitched up, voices low, and eyes always watching the door. Your eyes drift upward as you settle onto the stone, the cool marble pressing into your thighs. Just above your line of sight, scratched into the plaster or carved into soft stone, is a glimpse into Roman humor. Crude, clever, and surprisingly familiar. This is where Rome's wit lingers longest, the graffiti walls of the public latrines. Above each seat, you might find a short quip, a dirty joke, a boastful claim, or an insult sharpened to a point. Imagine crouching here centuries ago, shifting awkwardly while reading a rude line about the man who sat before you. Maybe it's a mocking poem about someone's mother-in-law, or a line bragging about romantic conquests. Some jokes are so ancient They echo modern bathroom scribbles. Some things never change. One fact that makes historians smirk: Roman graffiti has survived in more latrines than temples. Archaeologists have uncovered walls layered with scribbles, some so faint they're like whispers from the past, others etched deep by a drunk patron determined to be remembered. In Pompeii, a famous latrine scrawl reads, "Secundus defecated here," an immortal claim to fleeting glory. A quirkier find. In a few spots, professional scribes offered their services to write insults for those who couldn't manage it themselves. Pay a small fee, get a sharp jab carved forever above the seat. Imagine paying someone to roast your rival while you did your business. That's Roman petty energy at its finest. Scholars continue to debate whether these scribbles were spontaneous or planned. Were they part of the toilet's charm, an early form of stand-up comedy for those who lingered too long? Or were they warnings, inside jokes passed among regulars? There's no scholarly consensus. Some lines read like drunken rambling. Others show clever wordplay, hidden references, or crude puns that only locals would get. You lean back, imagining the sound of a stylus scratching stone, the laughter that might follow. Maybe the line made someone spit wine through their nose or curse the name etched beside it. Each scribble was a fleeting rebellion against boredom and authority. No senators or censors here, just everyday Romans carving out their own moment of immortality. Sometimes the graffiti turned serious too. In rare cases, political slogans creep onto the walls, scribbled between jokes about bodily functions. A protest against taxes, a crude remark about a corrupt official. It's toilet humor, sometimes, literally sometimes biting social commentary. If you listen closely, the walls speak with 1,000 voices that Roman historians still piece together word by word. You glance at the sponge resting by your feet, the steady trickle of water humming in your ears. Overhead, you read another line. "Lucius owes me a drink." Simple, direct, a tiny debt frozen in time above a hole in the ground. You wonder if Lucius ever paid up. If you visit the ruins today, you can run your fingers over these words, weathered but stubborn like the stubborn jokes they hold. You stand where someone once squatted squinting at the scrawl, maybe adding your own. The laughter fades, but the graffiti lingers, proof that even when all that marble and glory cracked and fell, the jokes remained. So, sit a moment longer on your imaginary seat. Trace your fingers across invisible letters. Listen for the echo of a drunk voice bragging about last night's lover, or cursing the sponge thief who came before him. This was Rome's public record, written not in scrolls, but scratched above the sound of trickling water. Here in the shadows of stone benches and crude jokes, you're closer to the real Rome than any grand forum or triumphal arch could bring you. A city built by emperors, but defined by the words of its ordinary citizens, one crude punchline at a time. A faint rumble beneath your feet reminds you that what happens above these marble seats doesn't just vanish. It flows deep underground, disappearing into the hidden veins of ancient Rome. If the latrines were where people talked, joked, and lingered, the real magic happened below the plumbing wonders that kept the empire's bowels quite literally moving. Step carefully, now minding your sandals, on slick stone steps that lead down into the damp underbelly of the city. You find yourself staring into the mouth of the Cloaca Maxima Rome's grand sewer, a marvel of ancient engineering so ambitious that parts of it still guide rainwater today. One solid fact: the Cloaca Maxima was built over 2,500 years ago, first by the Etruscans and later expanded by Rome's early kings. It wasn't just a tunnel. It was an artery draining runoff from the streets, waste from the latrines, and the debris of daily life. Without it, the Roman Forum would have flooded each winter, turning the seat of empire into a swamp of filth. Inside the tunnels stretch wide enough for a man to stand upright, brick-lined, and echoing with the constant trickle and splash of water. Some historians still argue whether the scale of Rome's sewers came from practical necessity or sheer civic showmanship. Was it all about hygiene, or about boasting that Rome could do what no other city could control nature's mess channel it and send it away? A quirky detail that always startles modernized maintenance crews. Rome had specialized workers who descended into these dank tunnels with oil lamps and scrapers to clear blockages, chase out rats, and keep the flow steady. Imagine clambering into a pitch-black drain by torchlight, waist-deep in murky water, scraping gunk off stone with nothing but a bronze shovel and sheer determination. And yet they did it. They kept the city clean, well as clean as a metropolis, with 1 million people and countless public toilets could be. For the average Roman, seeing water rush beneath the latrines gave comfort. It meant the city's heart still beat strong, carrying away the daily burden of humanity. Scholars debate just how effective the sewers really were. Some claim they prevented major outbreaks of disease by removing waste quickly. Others note that without proper understanding of germs, Rome's water might have done as much harm as good. After all, parts of the same system supplied drinking water to fountains, baths, and homes, clean in theory, but often questionable in practice. Stand here with me now, deep beneath the Forum stones. Overhead, the noise of the market fades into muffled echoes. Donkeys braying, merchants shouting, sandals clacking on marble. Down here, it's just the rush of water, the whisper of ancient bricks sweating with centuries of damp secrets. One tunnel curves off to a hidden chamber, where engineers once checked for leaks or collapses. Another leads straight to the Tiber River, where Rome's waste spilled out in an endless gray stream. When floods came, the river reversed its flow, sending back a stinking reminder that even Rome couldn't always master nature. Picture a Roman plumber, now no blue overalls, just a tunic hitched above the knees, a flickering oil lamp in hand, crawling along a slippery ledge while the city sleeps overhead. Maybe he curses a marble statue clogging the channel. Yes, statues fell in sometimes, or he yells up a grate at laughing children, dropping pebbles just to see where they'll go. That's the truth. Buried beneath all the marble glory, Rome's greatness depended as much on its unseen sewers as on its glittering temples. It's easy to admire emperors and legions, but it was the hum of flowing water that kept plague at bay streets walkable and latrines bearable. Next time you see an ancient drain cover carved with the face of Cloacina, the goddess of the sewer, pause and listen. Below your feet, tunnels older than empires still breathe. Water trickles, echoes bounce off curved stone, and somewhere down there, a ghostly worker drags his bronze scraper through the muck, keeping Rome alive one clog at a time. So lift your feet off the imaginary latrine floor for a moment and give silent thanks to the Cloaca Maxima, that mighty hidden river that once carried away the secret sins and sponges of the greatest city the world had ever known. Step back above ground, now sandals brushing marble thresholds, worn smooth by thousands of feet. The sun is bright again, glinting off statues and tiled roofs. But your mind lingers on that dark underworld of pipes and hidden streams. For the Romans, a well-plumbed latrine wasn't just convenience, it was a statement of wealth, order, and civic pride. Picture the grandest public toilets in the empire, lavish echoing chambers funded by wealthy patrons or ambitious emperors eager to show off their generosity. Some of these facilities gleamed with polished marble mosaic floors, carved pillars, and even heated walls in colder climates. If you imagine a grimy hole in the ground, think again, for the privileged relieving oneself could feel like stepping into a private bathhouse minus the privacy. One documented fact that often surprises people funding a public toilet or farica was an honorable civic act. Just as wealthy Romans donated bathhouses, fountains, or temples, they gifted latrines to cities and towns. An engraved stone slab would proudly declare the donor's name immortalized right where people sat and sighed in relief. There's no stronger reminder that status in Rome was built on public approval, quite literally from the bottom up. A quirky twist. Sometimes the latrines themselves became places to flaunt power. Imagine a governor visiting a town locals would escort him to their brand new latrine complex. Marble, gleaming water, gurgling smoothly beneath the seats. It wasn't just about waste. It was proof of civilization, prosperity, and the donor's good standing with the gods who guarded public health. Some scholars remain divided on whether this civic pride extended beyond showing off clean facilities. Did these gleaming toilet blocks really uplift the poor who might otherwise squat over filthy pits at home? Or were they mostly reserved for respectable citizens leaving the underclass to fend for themselves? Surviving records hint at both stories. Fancy latrines downtown, but also dark alleys, where the desperate dug quick holes behind insulae, the cramped apartment blocks that housed the city's masses. Inside the elite toilet halls, prestige gleamed from every polished surface. Mosaics might depict scenes of ocean waves or mythical creatures distracting visitors from the less glamorous business at hand. Marble benches curved perfectly so no one shifted uncomfortably. Bronze fixtures glinted under flickering oil lamps. In colder provinces, underfloor heating kept the chill away, proving that Roman engineers would not let a draft ruin your social hour. One odd little detail still found carved into stone, a warning about vandalism. Some toilet donors were so proud of their gift that they threatened fines, or worse, against anyone caught chipping away marble to steal for another building project. In the busy swirl of Roman cities, a fresh slab of marble was worth more than a few dirty jokes scribbled above the seats. Walk these tiled floors with me now, ghosting past invisible patrons wrapped in dyed wool cloaks or crisp linen tunics. Hear the low hum of gossip, the splash of water, the soft flicker of torchlight playing on the walls. Everyone is equal here, sort of. But not really. A senator might perch next to a merchant, but a slave, he'd be waiting outside with a bucket or forced to squat behind the tenement, hoping nobody noticed. Still, the public latrine remained a mark of civilization. Visitors from less developed corners of the empire gawked at Rome's plumbing, marveling at how so many people could gather, relieve themselves, and walk away cleaner than before. Some foreign dignitaries wrote home in wonder. How could a city so vast smell so little of its own waste? The answer lay here, in this strange, echoing chamber that fused luxury and necessity. And when night fell, oil lamps flickered, low marble seats cooled, and the hum of voices faded into dripping water and distant street noise. A servant might slip in to scrub the floors. A rat might scurry across mosaic waves. But the pride remained etched in stone plaques and whispered in stories of generous patrons who turned a basic human need into a sign of urban might. If you ever wander Rome's ruins and stumble upon a cracked latrine bench half buried in grass, pause and run your hand along its smooth edge. Imagine the names that once adorned these walls in neat official Latin. They didn't donate statues alone. They donated the quiet dignity of not digging a hole behind your house. A small thing, maybe. But when marble cracked and empires fell, the sewers and toilets, those humble gifts, outlasted the donors themselves. So stand here a moment longer in this ghostly corridor of civic vanity and shared relief. Listen for the soft trickle of water, the distant clink of coins dropped into temple boxes, the low murmur of Romans bragging about how clean their city was even here on the marble seat. Somewhere in the shadows of Rome's grandest latrine halls, between the polished marble and the trickle of water, lingers a quiet shrine, one that hints that not everything about Roman toilets was purely practical. It's time to meet Cloacina, the goddess of the sewer, and glimpse the sacred hidden in the stink. It might seem strange to modern ears that Romans prayed over waste, but they did. One fact that still fascinates historians: Cloacina's name appears in ancient inscriptions right where you'd least expect, engraved near sewer outflows, carved into small shrines by public toilets, even on coins. Her name comes from cloaca Latin, for drain or sewer. To the Romans, cleanliness and order were so vital, they demanded divine oversight. Picture a tiny altar tucked near the entrance to a public latrine, a simple stone pedestal, maybe crowned with a wreath of laurel or a flickering oil lamp. A passerby might pause, murmur a quick plea that the sewers flow freely, that the next sponge is clean, that diseases stay away. For a civilization that believed waste could bring plague spirits or curses if mismanaged, Cloacina was part guardian, part plumber in divine form. One quirky legend claims Cloacina began as a water nymph, her shrine built when Rome's first king, Titus Tatius, needed to purify the city's drains after a battle left corpses clogging the river's flow. Over time, she merged with Venus. For some citizens, Venus Cloacina, goddess of both love and latrines. Only the Romans could link romance and plumbing in the same breath. Scholars remain divided on whether everyday Romans truly worshipped her, or if her cult was more symbolic a way for city officials to claim they had heaven's blessing over the messy business of waste management. Either way, when workers crawled into the Cloaca Maxima's damp tunnels, they knew they carried Cloacina's watchful eyes on their shoulders. Stand here with me in the dim candlelight of a Roman latrine hall, a small marble plaque bearing Cloacina's name glinting just above the door. You can almost smell the incense someone burned to keep away bad smells and worse spirits. Maybe a coin or two glimmers in a tiny offering dish, an ancient insurance policy against backed-up pipes and unseen pests. Roman poets sometimes mocked this devotion. Juvenal, always quick with an insult, once joked that the goddess of the sewer deserved more sacrifices than Jupiter. After all, what was a king of gods compared to the one who kept the streets from flooding with filth? It's crude humor, but in its way, it shows just how practical Roman spirituality could be. It wasn't just Cloacina either. The Romans wove their religion through every layer of daily life. Household gods guarded kitchens and doorways. Lares watched over crossroads and alleys. And in the damp, echoing halls of latrines, Cloacina reigned a quiet reminder that nothing, no matter how base or smelly, was beneath the attention of the divine. You bend down and brush your fingers over a carved sewer stone, imagining the prayers whispered here long before the walls crumbled and the drains clogged with centuries of soil. Who knows what secrets the goddess of the sewer still keeps sealed beneath Rome's cracked cobblestones? Maybe she listened still water, trickling through ancient tunnels, carrying lost offerings of laurel leaves and whispered wishes away into the Tiber's eternal flow. So next time someone scoffs that the ancients had no sense of sanitation, think of Cloacina, humble, hidden, half forgotten, but proof that in Rome, even the dirtiest details of daily life deserved marble altars and whispered prayers. In the empire that prized order above chaos, even the drains had a goddess. Step back into the sunlight, now sandals brushing warm stones, the faint echo of a prayer for clean sewers drifting behind you. Somewhere beneath your feet, the water flows on, just as Cloacina would have wanted. Outside the temple of Cloacina, and beyond the grandeur of marble benches, lies another more delicate layer of Rome's toilet etiquette, one shaped not by gods or engineers, but by the ever-present dance of gender roles. Who exactly could squat, where and with whom, was never left to chance in a city obsessed with rules rank and reputation. Imagine stepping into one of the larger public latrines near the busy bathhouses. The marble seats gleam, the air hums with gossip and the drip of fresh water. But look closer. There's an unspoken choreography at work. Most communal latrines were designed for men. The open seating, the constant chatter, the casual shoulder-to-shoulder business suited a world where Roman masculinity relished public life. But what about the women of Rome? One undeniable fact: wealthy Roman women rarely braved these big, echoing halls. Instead, they used smaller latrines attached to bathhouses, marketplaces, or private villas, sometimes discreetly tucked behind courtyards or hidden by thick curtains. A lady of status would arrive with a slave girl in tow there to hold up layers of stola and palla to mind the sponge stick, to keep an eye out for prying eyes. Privacy was power. A quirky detail tucked into a few surviving wall signs or simple carvings showing which latrine door led to which section. One might show a stick figure in a toga, another in a long dress. Some sites even hint at unisex latrines, mixed-use spaces, where all sorts mingled when civic design or local custom allowed it. In cramped tenement blocks, there were few rules at all, a hole dug in the yard, shared by whomever needed it. Scholars still argue about just how strict these gender boundaries really were. Some believe that women regularly used public latrines in big markets, or along busy roads, slipping in when needed. Others insist respectable women would rather risk a chamber pot at home than squat beside strangers. Roman moralists loved to scold women who spent too much time near bathhouses and latrines, suggesting with a sniff of disapproval that not every visit was about hygiene alone. Peek into daily life, and you find all kinds of little contradictions. For Rome's poorer women, laundry washers, vendors, slaves, privacy was a luxury they couldn't afford. Public toilets were simply another corner of the city to claim no matter who sat 2 seats down. Here elbows knocked, rumors bloomed, and gossip slithered back home in whispered tales. One fragment of graffiti even teases this social crossing, a scrawl that mocks a senator's wife for using the same latrine as common fish sellers. Was it an insult about hygiene virtue, or just her poor taste in neighborhood facilities? Historians can only guess. Beneath all the rules and whispers lurks the real truth. Rome's public toilets were both democratic and divided. Marble benches erased some lines. Rich or poor, senator or merchant, all perched on the same cold stone. But behind the walls, curtains and carved door markers, gender and class, still drew invisible borders. Picture the contrast: a noblewoman reclining in her villa's private toilet alcove, small but tiled, perfumed with incense, perhaps even attended by an enslaved servant pouring water from a bronze jug. Compare that to a tired market girl ducking into a roadside latrine, careful to keep her dress from brushing the wet stone floor eyes, darting to the sponge on a stick she knows has seen better days. Even in Rome's most basic moments, power decided who could be comfortable and who would always hover awkwardly, half listening for footsteps. The city's pride in its plumbing didn't always mean equality flowed as freely as the water below. So stand here with me just inside the threshold of a bustling latrine. Feel the brush of fabric as someone slips past a half-whispered joke drifting through the steam from a nearby bathhouse. Look at the signs scratched on the wall stick figures curling Latin letters, faint arrows showing where a woman might find a moment's privacy if she was lucky. When you wander the ruins today, you can still trace these hidden stories. One cracked wall might reveal where a curtain once hung. A narrow corridor hints at a space where men lingered while women slipped behind a screen. Even now, the marble tells you more than dry textbooks ever could. These latrines weren't just places to sit, they were places to watch. Who sat beside you, who shouldn't be there, who lingered too long, who didn't belong. They remind us that even the mundane act of relieving oneself could echo with quiet questions of rank, gender, and rumor. So lean your shoulder against the cool stone, imagine the rustle of a silk stola brushing the floor, and listen to the faint gossip that drifts through history's cracked walls. In the empire's greatest city, even nature's call obeyed society's pecking order, except, of course, for the rats and the trickling water, which never cared who sat where. As you linger among the echoing marble benches and trickling water, another figure drifts into view, someone often overlooked in tales of emperors, engineers, and senators. Without them, however, Rome's communal toilets might have become unbearable in a matter of days. Meet the quiet keepers of Rome's waste, the toilet attendants. You can almost hear the soft slap of sandals as an attendant makes his rounds, a bucket in one hand, a long-handled broom in the other. These workers often enslaved people, freedmen, or the very poor, kept the flow flowing. One verifiable fact: the Roman term foricarius describes these attendants whose job was to clean the floors, rinse the channels, top up the sponge water, and ensure the latrine stayed as pleasant as a hall of open seats could ever be. In grander latrines, especially those attached to bathhouses, attendants might also offer scented oils or a polite splash of perfumed water for those who could pay a coin or two extra. The smell of rose or myrrh did wonders to soften the reality of dozens of people doing their business side by side. One quirky record survives from Pompeii mentioning an attendant who carved his name into the latrine wall, proof that while the marble bore the jokes of bored patrons, it also held the pride of the ones who kept the place running. The scribble reads more like a boast than a complaint: Marius cleaned here. A tiny echo of dignity in a job few wanted but everyone needed. Scholars continue to debate how these attendants were organized. Some argue they were employed by city authorities, funded through taxes, just like sewer maintenance crews. Others believe wealthier citizens paid private attendants to look after specific latrines near their villas or shops, ensuring that clients and guests never had to suffer an unkempt bench. Step into the scene for a moment. Dawn breaks over Rome, the city waking with its usual grumble of carts and vendors. Before the first merchant squats on a marble seat, the foricarius arrives. He sweeps up scraps of cloth, wipes down stone worn smooth by thousands of backsides, checks the sponge channel to be sure it runs clear and fresh. If a marble seat cracks, he notes it for the mason. If a graffiti scribble offends the wrong patron, he might be ordered to scrape it away, though more often than not, new jokes appear by sundown. One odd twist. These attendants sometimes doubled as unofficial gossip brokers, lurking in the background, sweeping floors, and topping up water. They heard everything. Who was cheating whom? Who owed whom money? Who bragged about scandalous secrets they'd never dare whisper in the forum? Some attendants sold these scraps of overheard chatter to local busybodies, another small income stream in an empire where survival meant creativity. Now imagine the other side of this daily grind. In a smaller latrine, far from the gleaming marble of the forum, an attendant crouches with a clay lamp scraping muck from a clogged drain with a simple bronze scoop. Rats skitter through the shadows. The smell turns sour in the summer heat. No incense here, just the scrape of metal on stone, the sigh of a man doing work that few noticed, but everyone relied upon. There's no scholarly consensus on how these workers were treated. Some inscriptions hint that a good foricarius could earn enough for a modest freedom buying his way out of servitude with a few saved denarii. Others lived and died in the shadows of the city's sanitation unrecorded except by the smooth floors and clean benches they left behind. Still, for all the hidden drudgery, Rome's attendants remind us that civilization isn't just marble arches and golden statues. It's the quiet labor that hums below the official story oil lamps, flickering in the dark brooms, sweeping away what history prefers to forget. Without these caretakers, all the Cloaca Maxima's grand tunnels would have backed up, all the civic pride in marble seats would have crumbled beneath the stink. Stand here with me a moment longer in the hush before dawn. The foricarius pauses to rest his broom against a wall. He rubs a hand over a scratch of graffiti. Maybe he'll carve his name tonight, a small rebellion against being invisible. He checks the water nods at the trickle and slips away before the first patron arrives. When you settle onto that cold marble seat, gossip with your neighbor, laugh at a dirty joke, remember him, the quiet figure who made it possible for you to linger a little longer. So next time you trace a finger over a cracked latrine bench or peer down a ruined drain, imagine the echo of a broom, the flicker of a clay lamp in the dark, and the foricarius humming to himself as he keeps Rome's proud promise of clean streets alive one sweep at a time. As you drift along the echoing marble benches, your mind wanders beyond the grand public halls. For not every Roman answered nature's call in a well-lit marble-clad latrine humming with gossip. Some tried to sneak privacy into their own cramped corners, only to discover that the empire had rules for that too. Enter the curious tale of Rome's outlawed outhouses. Step back in time to a bustling tenement block, a crammed insula where dozens of families live shoulder to shoulder. The wealthiest have chamber pots, fine bronze, or simple clay, emptied daily by slaves or family members. But for many poor residents, even that was a luxury. A hole dug behind the building, hidden behind a crude wooden fence, or a cluster of broken amphorae was often the answer. One historical fact Roman authorities, keen on keeping their city clean and their sewers flowing, made backyard pits illegal inside the city walls. The Lex Julia Municipalis, Rome's ancient urban code, laid out strict rules about waste. You couldn't just dig a hole behind your house and hope the neighbors wouldn't notice the smell. Any citizen caught with an illegal pit could face fines or be forced to connect to the main sewer, a costly affair that few could afford. Yet the law didn't always stop them. Archaeologists have found plenty of small, unofficial pits behind insulae and taverns. Some were just shallow ditches lined with stones. Others were no more than a worn patch of earth, covered by a bit of scrap wood. In a city of more than 1 million people, it was inevitable that corners would be cut literally and figuratively. A quirky side effect of these backyard outhouses, fights between neighbors. Some surviving complaints record citizens ratting each other out for digging pits too close to property lines or letting waste seep into shared courtyards. One tablet from Ostia, Rome's port city, records a legal dispute over a backyard toilet that overflowed in a storm, sending a foul river into a neighbor's wine cellar. Imagine explaining that to your dinner guests. Scholars continue to debate how strictly these laws were enforced. Did officials really traipse through back alleys searching for secret pits? Or did they turn a blind eye so long as the smell didn't waft too far into respectable streets? Some suggest that fines were more about filling city coffers than keeping the city spotless. Rome was famous for turning daily life into a taxable moment. Still, the city did try to steer people away from backyard pits by making the public latrines not just cleaner, but more appealing. Running water attendants, mosaic floors, luxuries compared to squatting behind a rickety fence in the dark. For those who could afford the stroll, the official facilities promised comfort and the quiet satisfaction of obeying the law. Imagine the daily choice for a poor laborer after a long day hauling amphorae at the docks. Does he trudge 10 streets to the nearest public latrine, hoping it's open and not too crowded? Or does he slip behind his building, praying the neighbor won't complain to the city clerk about the suspicious new pit by the alley wall? One curious detail: the fight against illegal pits didn't end at the city gates. Roman military camps had strict latrine rules too. Soldiers who dug unsanctioned holes near tents risked fines. Or worse, some records mention minor punishments like extra guard duty or docking of rations. Discipline, even in waste, kept the camp clean, and the chain of command unchallenged. You can almost picture it, night falling over a cramped insula, a small backyard corner, hidden by battered clay jars, a tenant squatting in the flickering glow of an oil lamp, ears pricked for the sound of a neighbor's door creaking open. All for a few minutes of stolen privacy, and the hope that tomorrow's rain will wash the evidence away. Meanwhile, up the hill, a senator strolls into a grand perfumed latrine built with marble from distant quarries, his sandals tapping across mosaics that sparkle in torchlight. He doesn't worry about secret pits or city fines. His name might even be carved on a plaque above the doorway, forever celebrated for gifting the city a clean place to do its dirty business. So next time you hear that ancient Rome was a marvel of order and sanitation, remember the hidden backyard pits, the small rebellions dug into the soil behind tenements. They whisper a truth that even the Cloaca Maxima couldn't fully flush away, no matter how grand the sewers people find ways to bend the rules for a bit of privacy when nature calls. Pause here a moment in the alley's damp shadows. Picture the hasty shovel scraping earth, the anxious glance over a neighbor's wall, the hope that no city clerk comes knocking tomorrow. A backyard pit is just a hole, but in Rome, even a hole could reveal the tangled dance between law survival and the very human need to squat in peace. As you make your way through Rome's alleys, dodging carts, market stalls, and the occasional stray goat, you might catch sight of something buzzing near the edge of a latrine or fluttering around a backyard pit. It's a nuisance we still know too well: mosquitoes. But in ancient Rome, these tiny pests weren't just an annoyance, they were creatures of mystery, rumor, and surprisingly, belief. One solid fact historians can agree on: mosquitoes thrived in Rome's warm, marshy environment, especially near standing water in bathhouses, sewers, and backyard pits. The Tiber's slow bends and the city's sprawling aqueduct-fed fountains provided endless breeding spots. But how Romans understood and explained these pests that drifts into a stranger realm. Imagine a Roman matron stepping carefully into a shaded latrine. She swats at the air, mutters under her breath, and drops a sprig of rosemary by the door. A simple gesture, but one rooted in the belief that strong scents could ward off insects, and by extension, ward off illness. The Romans suspected a link between foul air miasma and disease, so anything that masked bad smells seemed to them a barrier against invisible danger. A quirky detail, some wealthier latrine patrons carried tiny pomanders, small metal or ceramic balls filled with herbs and resins. They'd hold them to the nose while seated, partly to mask the scent, partly to chase away buzzing intruders. Archaeologists have found remains of such pomanders, sometimes shaped like little apples or spheres engraved with leafy patterns. Yet, despite these clever tools, the bites still came. And so, folklore stepped in. Romans whispered that mosquitoes favored certain unlucky people, those born under specific stars, or those who failed to appease minor household spirits. One bit of graffiti even blames a mosquito plague on a neighbor's unclean offering, as if a sloppy temple ritual had doomed an entire street to itchy misery. Scholars remain divided on how widespread these beliefs truly were. Were they deeply held fears passed through generations, or passing superstitions whispered among neighbors when summer heat turned the air thick and buzzing? Written records, mostly by educated men, rarely linger on such mundane matters. Yet the scraps that survive curses against biting spirits. Amulets shaped like frogs or tiny winged figures suggest a quiet desperation to ward off what medicine could not yet explain. Step closer to the marble benches of a large latrine hall, and you'll notice small braziers burning pungent herbs like mint myrtle or even crushed cedar. Historians believe these smoky offerings had a practical purpose, strong scents to drive away some insects. But to a Roman, the fragrant smoke also soothed restless spirits and perhaps restless minds. One curious belief recorded by Pliny, the elder, rubbing crushed wormwood mixed with vinegar on the skin might keep mosquitoes away. Was it effective? Modern science says mildly, but likely less than they hoped. Still, the ritual itself, mixing, dabbing, reciting a quiet charm, offered comfort when logic had little to offer. Now picture the darker corners of Rome, where superstition grew strongest. A cramped, insular courtyard, its latrine pit covered with a cracked board. Neighbors complain of mosquitoes swarming at dusk. A local wise woman suggests hanging garlic over the door, or smearing olive oil infused with rue across the lintel. Whether it worked hardly mattered. Belief itself eased fear. The empire's engineers could conquer mountains with aqueducts and drain marshes with tunnels, but they never quite conquered the mosquito. In summer months, buzzing clouds still rose from the Tiber's banks, from stagnant cisterns, and yes, from the runoff pools beneath even the grandest public latrines. One fragment of an old curse tablet survives, its lead sheet thin as a leaf found near a sewer grate. It reads, "May the stinging spirits pass me by and trouble my enemy instead." Was it written with genuine belief, or a moment of frustration after too many sleepless nights? Scholars continue to puzzle over it. But either way, it whispers across centuries of the same buzzing frustration you and I still know. So stand here with me a moment, just outside the cool marble arch of a public latrine, the evening air turning golden. You hear the faint hum growing louder, feel the prickle on your neck, and instinctively brush it away. A timeless gesture unchanged since Rome's days of togas and oil lamps. And in that fleeting motion, you glimpse an ancient truth. For all their engineering genius, their gods, their laws, and marble seats, the Romans were as powerless before a biting insect as we often feel today. But they tried, through charms, smoke herbs, and whispered curses, to bend even the smallest wings to human will. As you wander back into the broader city, sandals brushing sun-warmed stones, remember the unseen army rising at dusk from every ditch and drain. The empire might boast of legions and emperors, but each night the mosquitoes reminded even Rome itself that some battles could only be endured, not won. By now, you've traced the marble benches, the whispered gossip, the sponge sticks the hidden shrines, and the buzzing pests. Yet if there's one thing that truly survives the centuries in all its naked, unfiltered glory, it's Rome's toilet humor, scratched into stone, muttered between sighs, or carved defiantly above the heads of polite society. Welcome to the lingering echo of Roman toilet jokes. Picture yourself perched on a cool marble seat, the chatter around you drifting off as you tilt your head up to squint at faint letters etched above eye level. One line boasts, "Here sat Marcus, braver than any gladiator." Another teases, "Secundus can't aim straight. Beware the splash." They're crude, childish, and oddly comforting proof that even in an empire that built aqueducts and colosseums, human nature remained gleefully irreverent. One solid fact scholars have cataloged hundreds of short, often filthy scribbles across public latrines, bathhouse walls, and street-side urinals. Some are simple boasts, "I was here," or "I conquered this seat." Others spin longer insults, or limericks poking fun at rivals or praising secret lovers. If you thought bathroom stall graffiti was modern, Rome's stones prove otherwise. A delightfully quirky detail survives from Pompeii, where a latrine wall carries this gem. The finch sings sweetly here, but the smell is foul pity, the bird who wrote it. Maybe a bored merchant, maybe a drunk sailor. Maybe it was copied from some popular line of street poetry. Either way, it lingers centuries later, reminding us that crude jokes live longer than marble statues. Scholars continue to argue whether these toilet scribbles were truly anonymous. Some believe people left their real names, flaunting scandalous boasts with reckless pride. Others suspect many names were invented early versions of graffiti tags meant to provoke a chuckle or hide an author's identity. Imagine scratching an insult about your neighbor's wife, then walking out, whistling, hoping nobody connects the scrawl to you. Not every joke was filthy, though. Some offered philosophical jabs disguised as crude observations. A line found in Ostia's docks reads, "All things pass, some more noisily than others." A toilet pun and a bit of stoic wisdom, all in one line. The blending of bodily humor and big ideas was classic Roman wit, equally at home in bathhouses, taverns, and under the flicker of an oil lamp in the Senate's back rooms. Here's an oddity that still sparks debate. Did these jokes reflect social rebellion? Some historians see them as harmless distractions for the masses. Others read them as tiny jabs at the elite, a lowly merchant mocking a pompous senator, a slave poking fun at the master who sat 2 seats down. Carving a rude line in a public space was a risk, but also a thrill, an early taste of breaking the fourth wall. Imagine the attendant sweeping nearby, rolling his eyes at yet another joke about the sponge. He's heard them all before, maybe he scratched 1 or 2 himself during a slow night. He might even point out the best lines to a new visitor, guiding them, like a tour guide through a marble gallery of crude poetry. And the jokes weren't limited to words. Some latrine walls show tiny carved images, stick figures bending in ways that left little to the imagination, animals doing things best left undescribed, or doodles of sponge sticks wielded like weapons. It was graffiti as comic relief, a reminder that in Rome, the line between art politics and toilet talk was thin as a stylist's scratch. Stand here a moment longer, marble cool beneath you eyes, tracing the uneven lines carved centuries before you were born. The same hand that wrote a lover's name on a temple might scribble a dirty limerick here, half hidden by flickering torchlight. And when that torch guttered out, the stone kept the secret waiting for archaeologists and sleepy bedtime historians to read it aloud centuries later. One can almost hear the ghost laughter echoing down the drain. The empire fell, emperors rose and crumbled, yet this simple human mischief outlived them all. The great sewer still trickles beneath Rome's streets, and somewhere a faint scrawl survives on a broken slab in a dusty museum drawer. Proof that when the marble cracked and the aqueducts dried, the jokes carried on. So next time you pass by a ruin labeled public latrine, don't wrinkle your nose and hurry past. Step in, tilt your head up, squint at the faint grooves left by a bored soul with a sharp stylus and a sharper tongue. Feel the echo of shared laughter, muffled groans, and whispered insults threads that connect you to a Roman who once perched here sponge-stick ready mischief on his mind. In the end, history may worship emperors and builders, but sometimes it's the graffiti above a toilet seat that brings us closest to the living, breathing soul of an empire. A dirty joke, a scratched insult, a fleeting moment of bathroom bravery that outlasted marble pillars and grand Senate speeches. Sit back, close your eyes, and listen for the faint chuckle drifting through the pipes where water once carried Rome's secrets away, jokes and all. Slip your feet back into well-worn sandals and follow the murmurs of steam and splashing water as we drift from the echoing marble latrines to another beloved Roman refuge, the bathhouse. If toilets were places to drop secrets in passing, the baths were where those whispers turned into full-blown tales, steam-swaddled, water-soaked, impossible to contain. One fact that ties these two worlds together in Rome: toilets and baths were often built side by side, sometimes even connected by clever plumbing that funneled waste away and brought fresh water in. Some larger bath complexes had grand latrines right at the entrance, clean attended, humming with quiet chatter. A patron might pause there before slipping into the tepidarium's warm mist, or cooling off in a frigidarium pool. Picture the scene: you wander from a bustling forum into the calm hush of a public bathhouse. The marble underfoot turns slick with humidity. Echoes of laughter, political gripes, and half-whispered scandals bounce from wall to wall. Before you wash away the city's dust, you pause at a row of open toilet seats tucked discreetly behind a tiled screen. There's no lock on the door, no need. Privacy was a rare luxury here, overshadowed by the comfort of shared routine. One detail that makes historians smirk: gossip flowed faster here than any drain. It's said that entire political careers were built or broken between a latrine bench and the warm marble slabs of the caldarium. Deals struck in the Senate often found their final confirmations over sponges and soap whispers drifting through steam like invisible ink on the bathhouse air. A quirkier slice of this daily ritual: many bathhouses offered perfumed oils to dab on your skin after you cleaned up. Some patrons, those with deeper pockets, paid attendance to rub scented unguents into their hair or backs. The irony, of course, was that these same oils often masked the lingering whiff of the latrines next door, an elegant cover for the less glamorous realities of communal relief. Scholars still argue just how much the baths and latrines shared in terms of actual plumbing. Some point to archaeological finds showing that wastewater from the baths helped flush the sewers beneath the toilets, a clever bit of Roman recycling. Others claim the link was more social than structural. The same merchant soldiers and philosophers who soaked in warm pools also perched elbow to elbow on cold marble seats, unbothered by the overlap. Imagine a young scribe pausing after a bath to relieve himself, knees brushing the toga of an old senator who's already half asleep on the bench beside him. They murmur about last night's chariot race, the rising cost of grain, maybe the scandal of a rival's mistress caught with a gladiator. The conversation drifts into steam, only to be repeated or twisted when they rejoin their friends lounging in the tepidarium. It wasn't all idle chatter either. Some bathhouse latrine clusters doubled as clandestine meeting spots for messengers and spies. One inscription, found near the ruins of a grand bath in Caracalla, hints at hush-hush dealings by the warm pool and cold seat, as if the smooth marble offered cover for whispered plans. Did conspiracies really bubble up alongside the bath's scented steam? Historians still debate, but the scraps of graffiti and half-finished letters suggest that Rome's shadows were deepest where steam met stone. One quirky little superstition: a few Romans believed that certain spirits, layers of the drain or sewer, lingered more strongly near bathhouse toilets than any dark alleyway. They'd offer small clay tokens or toss a coin into the drain just to keep the mischievous spirits content. If you peek at the floor of a ruined bath latrine today, you might find a faint green stain where a bronze coin corroded over centuries, proof of a tiny wish made in secret before stepping into warm waters. And always the sponge waited, cleaned in running channels by attendants who bustled from latrine to bath and back again. The same worker who topped up the oil lamps might rinse the sponge sticks, sweep the floors, and trade whispered gossip for a few copper coins slipped discreetly into a tunic pocket. So, stand with me a moment at the quiet seam where bathhouse marble meets toilet bench, where the warm steam of a caldarium sighs into the cool hush of the latrine. Listen for the splash of water meeting water, the low chuckle of gossip born in the bath and carried out through the drain. It's a small reminder that in Rome, daily life flowed through pipes, steam whispers, and gossip linking the sacred, the scandalous, and the spectacular. Beneath the domes and arches, the chatter and the chuckles, the sponge on its humble stick waited proof that even in the empire's finest halls, one thing connected everyone from emperor to slave: the unglamorous relief of a clean seat and a bit of stolen gossip drifting off like steam into the marble shadows. By now, your feet have wandered Rome's echoing latrine halls, drifted through the steam of bathhouses, and traced secret graffiti under flickering lamplight. But there's one final twist in this winding drainpipe of history: the quiet link between Rome's ancient sewers and the modern marvel you probably take for granted each morning, the humble flush. Step forward through time for a moment. Imagine the centuries rolling past the cracked marble benches, the Cloaca Maxima rumbling beneath fallen temples, the old sponge on a stick replaced by softer paper and shining porcelain. It's easy to forget, staring down a smooth white toilet bowl today, that its DNA flows straight from the ancient tunnels where Rome's waste once surged toward the Tiber. One fact that delights engineers and historians alike: the very idea of carrying waste away with running water owes a huge debt to Roman plumbing. They didn't invent the concept. Rudimentary drainage existed in Mesopotamia and the Indus Valley millennia before Rome rose, but the Romans turned the trickle into a roaring stream. Aqueducts brought fresh water, gravity carried waste away, and the Cloaca Maxima grew wide enough to sail a small boat through, at least according to some half-mythical accounts whispered by poets. But what makes this connection fascinating is not just pipes and tunnels. It's the mindset. To a Roman, public sanitation was a civic duty, an architectural boast, and a sign of civilization's peak. Today, you flip a handle, listen to the gurgle, and think nothing of it yet. That quiet swirl echoes an empire's dream that no street should stink, no courtyard flood with filth. One quirky relic stands in London. When the first modern flush toilets appeared in the 16th century, some inventors openly compared their designs to the Cloaca Maxima. Sir John Harrington, who built a primitive flush for Queen Elizabeth. I even bragged that his pipes and drains would have made the old Romans proud. A strange compliment, yet a true nod to the fact that Roman toilets had become the gold standard for centuries. Scholars still puzzle over just how much Roman know-how survived those long, messy medieval centuries, when Europe's cities largely gave up on public sewers and backyard pits returned in force. Was the knowledge truly lost? Or did fragments linger in monastic texts and the memories of city engineers patching crumbling Roman tunnels for their own dirty needs? There's no firm answer, only the echo of water trickling through half-collapsed bricks, carrying secrets forward through time. Imagine a medieval peasant trudging over an old Roman drain, not knowing that below his muddy boots lay tunnels that once shuttled senators' gossip and gladiators' leftovers to the Tiber. Or a Renaissance mason digging a cellar only to find a stretch of ancient pipe, its clay segments still snugly joined water, whispering along its hollow spine. Fast forward to Victorian London, another metropolis suffocating under its own waste, desperate to fix deadly outbreaks of cholera and stinking, stagnant streets. The engineers who finally tamed the Thames with brick-lined sewers tip their hats metaphorically, if not literally, to Rome's Cloaca Maxima. They dug wide tunnels, planned the flow of waste by gravity, and even borrowed the Roman habit of showing off fresh water fountains as proof that a city knew how to keep its people clean. And so, here you sit now, maybe curled up in bed, half listening to this sleepy voice, half dreaming of the next time you'll press a silver handle and watch water swirl your troubles away. You don't think of marble benches or sponges on sticks or the echo of a foricarius sweeping under torchlight. But the ghost of the Cloaca Maxima hums under every modern flush, a hidden river that connects your quiet bathroom to an empire's proud stone drains. A quirky tidbit that might make you smile next time you reach for the handle early. Flush toilets sometimes included small tanks designed to mimic Rome's constant flow of water. Engineers knew that still water bred stink, so they looked back at how Roman latrines kept clean channels always trickling under the seats. It's the same logic in miniature gravity, water waste gone. Stand here a final moment with me, just above the dark tunnels that still snake beneath modern Rome. Some sections of the Cloaca Maxima still carry runoff when the Tiber floods. Urban archaeologists squeeze through them by lantern light, brushing fingertips over bricks laid by hands who never dreamed that centuries later someone would crawl through the damp to admire their handiwork. Listen to that faint gurgle beneath the city's heartbeat. It's the sound of empire flowing forward, Rome's gift to modern pipes, basements, bathrooms, and sleepy voices telling you that when you flush, you echo marble benches, sponge sticks, and all the whispered jokes scratched into ancient stone. So when you wake tomorrow, groggy and blinking at the sun, take a sleepy second to thank the engineers who kept the flow flowing then and now. And if you ever find yourself wandering Rome's ruins, pause when you spot a cracked drain cover stamped with Cloacina's name. Tilt your ear to the trickle below. Somewhere down there, a ghost of marble benches and gossip drifts quietly through time, carrying away secrets, just as it always has. And so here we are standing at the edge of marble seats, long abandoned, peering down cracked stone drains that still whisper with the ghostly hush of water. Yet our journey isn't quite done. There's one last bend in this winding Roman sewer, what's left today, and how we piece together the secrets of ancient toilets from what time chose to bury or preserve. Step softly now, sandals crunching over sun-baked dirt and broken tiles. Somewhere beneath your feet lies a fragment of a seat, a chipped piece of mosaic floor, a length of lead pipe green, with centuries of corrosion. This is where archaeologists kneel, trowels in hand dust, brushing away the last echoes of Rome's communal hum. One solid fact for all Rome's fame: its latrines were often the first things to vanish when the empire's marble cracked. People scavenged stone benches for new houses, reused bricks for walls, or simply built over the old waste channels. Whole toilet blocks disappeared under churches, palaces, and apartment blocks. Some lay hidden for centuries until a lucky trench or a subway tunnel cracked them open again. A quirky detail: when archaeologists do find ancient latrines, they sometimes find more than just seats and sewers. Latrine pits are time capsules of daily life: coins lost from tunics, hairpins slipped from braids, broken oil lamps dropped by clumsy hands in the dim torchlight. There's even a rumor of a tiny carved figurine, possibly a good luck charm, found wedged between two latrine seats in Herculaneum. Who dropped it? A merchant fumbling in the dark, a child bored, while waiting for a parent surviving waste too, tells its story. Coprolites, fossilized remains of ancient waste, reveal the Roman diet in uncomfortably vivid detail: grains, olives, fish bones, seeds from exotic fruits, all broken down by centuries, yet still hinting at feasts long digested. Scholars pore over these relics, mapping parasites' illnesses and the quiet truth of what it really meant to live and eat in the empire's heart. And so the debate continues: were Roman latrines truly cleaner than medieval pits? Did the mighty Cloaca Maxima really sweep away disease as well as dirt? Some historians insist Rome's engineering kept its streets healthier than the cities that rose centuries later. Others point to plagues and parasites that lingered despite the flowing drains and flickering oil lamps. Yet no one denies the brilliance of it all: the vision of a city that dared to tame water, to carve marble benches side by side, to trust that gossip, humor, and the daily mess of humanity could swirl away beneath the feet of emperors and beggars alike. Stand beside an archaeologist for a moment. The sun beats down on a dusty trench near the old forum. A trowel scrapes against cold marble. A soft brush lifts grit from an ancient pipe. You can almost hear the echo of voices above centuries-gone merchants, muttering children, laughing the soft plop of water in a gutter that once carried secrets to the Tiber. One unexpected find: graffiti. Sometimes hidden under layers of grime, rediscovered letter by letter. A scratched joke about a neighbor's bad aim, a crude drawing of a sponge on a stick, or a plea to Cloacina to keep the pipes flowing another season. These scribbles, so small and human, connect us more closely than any grand temple inscription ever could. And what do we do with these broken benches, these damp tunnels that no longer carry waste, but now carry stories? We preserve them behind glass, in museums. We sketch maps of buried pipes under modern streets. We light up the tunnels for guided tours. Yes, in parts of Rome today, you can walk a safe stretch of the Cloaca Maxima boots, echoing where slaves once scraped muck by flickering lamp. In these moments, the line blurs between then and now. The same water that once trickled under a senator's sandals may still seep through cracks below your feet as you sip coffee on a Roman sidewalk cafe. The same tunnels that carried away scandal and stink now carry rainwater storm drains and the curious footsteps of archaeologists following the soft pulse of a forgotten river. So pause here at the last echo of our winding marble path. Listen for the whisper of the cloaca beneath Rome's humming streets. Feel the chill draft in a museum basement where a single stone bench sits behind a glass wall, smooth and cold, waiting for curious fingers to tap it to trace the curve where thousands once perched and lingered. Maybe you'll stand there someday, squinting at a faint scratch on the stone, half wondering if it's a crack or the ghost of a crude joke frozen in time. And maybe you'll smile, remembering this sleepy voice telling you that an empire's greatness can hide in the smallest places, in drains and sponges, jokes, and whispered gossip, all washed away, but never quite gone. When the lights fade tonight, and the soft trickle of your own modern pipes hums through the walls, you'll know a part of Rome flows there too, carrying secrets away into darkness, just as it always has.